subscribe, like the video, and, if possible, join Patreon. But if you don't have much money, you can support the channel by watching the novels on euroaudiobooks.com. Remember that you can participate in the polls so that your favorite novel gets published for free.
Was divided in half because of dogs and cats. Kurenai, do you like cats or dogs? Shintaro turned and asked casually. Kurenai thought seriously for a moment and answered honestly. It's hard to say. I like both. If I have to choose one, I'd pick the cat. Shintaro agreed. Similarly, cats are quieter than dogs. After all, I don't need a dog to help hunt and guard the house. But Kakashi is really annoying. Kurenai snickered. How can a ninja keep a dog for hunting and guarding the house? Yeah. Shintaro also smiled and shook his head. He suddenly remembered something, looked at her, and said, If you like cats, I can take you to a place before returning to Konoha. Kurenai's eyes lit up, and she asked expectantly, Where? Shintaro turned and said mysteriously, You'll know when the time comes. Kurenai turned around, but her attention quickly shifted. Shintaro, look at that. Shintaro saw a store selling kimonos and yukatas. The shop was filled with a dazzling array of clothes in various colors. He remembered the time when he went shopping with Kurenai before. So Shintaro wisely said, Let's go, we happen to need to change into civilian clothes. Otherwise, it will be a bit conspicuous. Kurenai nodded happily. Even her steps became faster, and she even hummed a tune. Then the situation was as follows. Does this look good? Good. Does this one look better or that one? They all look good. In this way, the two spent almost an hour shopping in this store. Shintaro bought himself a kimono with a blue and white sky pattern and a simple pure white yukata. Kurenai carefully selected a red kimono with beautiful embroidered patterns, and the other was a red and black yukata. The two of them walked out of the shop directly wearing kimonos, and walking together really gave them a sense of beauty. Kurenai stared blankly at Shintaro in his sky-patterned kimono and was stunned for a moment. Shintaro waved his palm in front of her eyes. After seeing her come to her senses, he said, Let's go to the hotel and book a room. Kurenai blushed and said, I want to book 2 rooms. Sure, the last tone of Shintaro's voice was long. Then he turned to her with his blue eyes. Let's go. Kurenai responded softly and followed him. The two then booked a hotel, went shopping after dinner, and at night, they were finally ready to start their business. The business here refers to hot spring bathing. If you come to the hot spring city and don't soak in the hot springs, then you haven't really been here. The two did not choose the bustling hot springs in the city center, but chose a secluded hot spring on the edge of the village. This hot spring was small, about the size of a bedroom, surrounded by walls made of stone. Outside the fence was a dense forest, providing a natural beauty. Steam billowed, and Shintaro was the only one in the hot spring. He stepped on the stone slab at the edge of the hot spring with his bare feet, untied his belt, and flicked off his pure white yukata to his feet in one motion. He lifted his foot and stretched into the warm hot spring, then slowly immersed his entire body into it, spreading his arms flat on the stone slab at the edge of the hot spring and leaning his back against the stone wall of the hot spring. Shintaro looked at the night sky, feeling very comfortable. However, it seems like this is the first time I've been in a hot spring alone. I used to be served by maids. He recalled when he used to bathe in hot springs in his previous life. He was always followed by a group of maids. But Shintaro didn't think too much about it. Although he missed the days in his previous life a bit, he also knew that he couldn't go back. At least there was no way to go back now. I don't know what that world would be like now. The warmth enveloped his whole body, making him more relaxed than ever before. It was unclear how much time had passed, but Shintaro suddenly stood up and caused water to splash. His eyes looked in a certain direction across the wall, which was where Kurenai was. Kurenai, 70. The cult of the evil god Shintaro immediately jumped out of the hot spring, standing naked amidst the mist. He grabbed yukata, put it on, and prepared to leap over the wall to reach the women's hot spring. The men's and women's hot springs at this location were separated by a considerable distance, likely to prevent peaking or because they were two distinct hot springs. However, this distance was still within the range of the six eyes' perception. At this moment, Shintaro sensed a malevolent aura approaching the women's hot spring where Kurenai was. Shintaro was in such a hurry that he didn't even have time to tie his yukata belt. Climbing the wall barefoot, his bathrobe flapped in the wind behind him, making him feel like he was walking under the moonlight. However, soon after, Shintaro slowed down and finally remembered he was taking a stroll, lowered his head, and tied his belt. It was fine to be barefoot. There were no limits to his soles. It seemed like his feet were touching the ground, but in reality, not even ants were crushed. Shintaro arrived at the women's hot spring and climbed over the wall to enter. He saw Kurenai wearing a yukata standing beside the women's hot spring, and in front of her was a man in a black robe standing still. By the wall, two girls in yukatas were cowering in the corner, trembling, clearly terrified. "Are you all right, Kurenai?" Shintaro asked knowingly. In fact, on his way over, he knew that Kurenai had instantly subdued the man in the black robe in front of her. Although this man had chakra in his body, he wasn't even as strong as a typical Konoha genin. How could he be a match for Kurenai, a trained shunin from Konoha? Kurenai forced a smile and said she was fine, but as a woman, she must have been scared when a strange man broke in while she was soaking in the hot spring. The man in the black robe was clearly under Jinjutsu, standing motionless in place. Shintaro approached the man, opened his two Sharingan, and cast another layer of Jinjutsu on him. Don't kill me. No. Evil God, save me." The man immediately squealed like a pig, as if he had just seen something extremely terrifying. This Jinjutsu made people see the deepest fears in their hearts. It was obvious that this man was afraid of death. Facing his fear and unable to move, the man almost fainted instantly. Shintaro weakened the Jinjutsu's effect so that the man wouldn't pass out directly, but would remain terrified. "Who are you, and what are you doing here? Tell me everything, or you will see something even more terrifying." Shintaro was very concerned about the evil god mentioned by the man, and had a vague feeling that the man's origin was not simple, and he was not just a common pervert or gangster. My name is Kotaro. I'm here to find sacrifices for the evil god." Beautiful girls are the best sacrifices. Kurenai and Shintaro exchanged glances, both understanding that this matter was not simple. "What is the evil god?" Shintaro continued to ask. "The evil god is the belief of our cult of the evil god. He is the greatest god." Kotaro became extremely excited when the evil god was mentioned. What are the teachings of the cult of the evil god? Since it involved religion, Shintaro asked about its teachings. The teachings are the most distinctive feature of a religion. Although he had a premonition after hearing the name, he was still shocked when the other party explained the teachings. Kill. The teaching of the evil god is for us believers to kill everyone around us. Kotaro shouted this extremely wicked doctrine almost frenziedly. Kurenai frowned, clearly not expecting the pervert she thought was actually a fanatic killer believer. "What do you think?" Shintaro turned and asked. Kurenai immediately said, "This cult is too dangerous. If left unchecked, it will definitely cause great trouble. Then let's destroy it." Shintaro said confidently, "Let's do it for the people." Kurenai asked worriedly, "Is it dangerous?" "Don't worry, I am very strong," Shintaro said, comforting her gently. Kurenai didn't know why, but she always believed in Shintaro, so she unconsciously nodded. Shintaro then continued to ask for detailed information about the cult of the evil god. "Where is the headquarters of the cult of the evil god? How many ninjas do you have? What are your methods?" "No, I can't tell you. Otherwise, the leader will punish me." Kotaro refused with trembling lips. Shintaro smiled slightly and enhanced the effect of the Jinjutsu. I don't know where the headquarters is, because every time I go there, my eyes are covered, and I'm taken there by the cadres." Shintaro increased the Jinjutsu's effect. I'll tell. Although my eyes were covered, I could hear the last part of the road was very close to a waterfall, and there was an echo. It must be a cave. Shintaro asked for more details. "What about the distance?" "About an hour's walk." Shintaro noted down the information and continued to ask, also the numbers and methods. Kotaro answered in panic. "There are more than 50 ordinary believers like me. There are 6 cadres, and the leader, The ordinary believers are almost the same strength as me, and some are even weaker than me. I don't know the strength of the cadres and the leader, but they once captured a jonin from Yubikure to sacrifice to the evil god. It seems to be a curse using blood as the medium. A curse? Shintaro repeated the word with a surprised look on his face. Kotaro panicked and shouted, "Yes, a curse." Shintaro understood all the information clearly, so he increased the effect of the Jinjutsu to frighten Kotaro until he fainted, and at the same time used gentle fists to block the meridians all over his body. Shintaro looked at Kurenai and said, "I'll go alone this time." If what he said is true, this operation is still a bit dangerous. But Kurenai stubbornly replied, "As a ninja, which mission isn't dangerous? I'll protect myself. At worst, I can handle the ordinary believers." Seeing her insistence, Shintaro could only say, "All right, let's go together." For him, this operation was necessary either to eliminate harm for the people or to understand the so-called curse. So it was natural for him to decide to go to the headquarters of the cult of the evil god to investigate. Kurenai went to comfort the two girls who had just bathed together. "Both of you, it's okay. We are ninjas from Konoha village. We just caught a bad guy from the cult of the evil god here. Please report to the officials and have someone arrest him." The two girls nodded, put on their bathrobes, and ran out. Shintaro opened the hot spring curtain, twisted it into a rope, and tied Kotaro tightly to the doorpost. Then he bit his finger and formed a seal to channel a large group of crows. "Hikaru, take them to a cave near a waterfall, about an hour's walk from here," Shintaro instructed. "Kaka!" Hikaru cried twice energetically, and then a large group of crows scattered to search. Shintaro then said, "Let's go back to the hotel to get our equipment." The two of them set off back to the hotel, put on their respective ninja outfits, gathered their gear, and then returned to the hot spring. 71. Evil got a large group of people gathered around the gate next to the hot spring. "Give me back my daughter. You will not die well." The crowd seemed very angry. Shintaro and Kurenai heard many people cursing and crying. "Ha ha! It is an honor for them to be sacrificed to the evil god." Kotaro's laughter echoed from the crowd. Shintaro and Kurenai pushed through the crowd and approached Kotaro. "Do you still want to experience what you did before?" Shintaro's cold words made Kotaro too scared to speak. When everyone saw the forehead protectors on Shintaro and Kurenai, they understood that the two were Konoha ninjas. The two girls from earlier also came out to identify them and said, "This man and woman are the ones who saved us and captured the bad guys." Hearing this, an old man came out of the crowd, held Shintaro's hand, and said, "I am the mayor of the hot spring city. On behalf of everyone in this city, I want to thank you." Shintaro nodded in greeting and asked, "What exactly is this evil god cult? Why are you targeting the hot spring city?" The mayor sighed, let go of his hand, and stepped forward before the crowd and said, "We don't know either. The hot spring city has always believed in the cat god and the dog god. We have never heard of this evil god. As for why they focus on Hot Spring City, it may be because Hot Spring City is a tourist city with many people coming and going. A few missing people wouldn't attract attention. Besides the missing passengers, some relatives and friends of our city's residents have also disappeared. Those damn people." Seeing the mayor's sad expression and the crowd, Kurenai's eyes reddened emotionally. Seeing her dim look, Shintaro stepped forward to comfort her, then said to the mayor, "I will help you destroy the cult." At this moment, Hikaru flew down from the sky and cawed several times. "Did you find the cave?" "Caw, all right, let's go." Hikaru led the way in the sky, and Shintaro and Kurenai immediately set off, leaving under the watchful eyes of the town's residents. Kotaro cursed viciously, "You will all become sacrifices to the evil god. You bastard." After hearing this, a man rushed forward and punched Kotaro in the teeth. Then many villagers rushed and kicked and punched him. The mayor watched and did not stop them. "You must return safely." The mayor prayed in his heart for the two of them. Shintaro and Kurenai traveled through the forest. Kurenai said worriedly, "If you encounter danger, run, safety first." Shintaro turned and said, "Don't worry, I never fight an uncertain battle. Under Hikaru's guidance, the two headed straight into the cave and arrived at the cave entrance within minutes. A waterfall and a cave, this should be the place. Shintaro let the shamisen drop in his arm, stroked its head with his fingers, then released the summoning technique and sent the crow back to Konoha. The waterfall flowed down, falling into the river and creating a spray of warm water mist. It seems the waterfall in the hot spring town is also a hot spring source. Shintaro and Kurenai entered the cave one after another. They both smelled sulfur. It seemed the volcano that created the hot spring town was located here. The outside of the cave was quite hidden and covered in water mist, making it impossible for ordinary people to find. Inside the cave, there was a long, narrow, deep corridor with dimly lit candles on platforms carved on both sides, indicating it was indeed the headquarters of the evil god cult. Kurenai drew a kunai and followed Shintaro closely. In the dark cave, only the kunai in her hand and Shintaro in front of her could give her a sense of security. The two walked slowly for a while and saw a bright light ahead. Shintaro turned and signaled her to be cautious, and Kurenai responded with a firm look. The two approached the corridor exit and heard noises inside. Why hasn't today's sacrifice been delivered yet? Isn't Kotaro the one finding the sacrifice today? All the cadres who went have returned, but he hasn't. Someone is coming in. Kishida-sama. Gather. Kotaro was captured in Hot Spring City. Be alert. Shintaro and Kurenai heard this and immediately rushed in, not giving the cult followers time to be on guard. At this moment, the followers were just learning that Kotaro had been captured and were still confused. Inside was a large cave, the size of a gymnasium. Shintaro used his 6 eyes to instantly determine the number and strength of the evil god cult followers in the cave. There was 1 cadre and 45 ordinary believers in this cave. The cadre's strength was between Genin and Shunin. Half of the ordinary believers were just commoners, and the other half had strength similar to Kotaro's. With these commoners, Shintaro was not worried about any danger at all. He rushed towards the cadre, Kishida first. Kishida reacted quickly and pulled out a black telescopic iron drill. The iron drill was more than a meter long. Such a strange weapon might be related to the so-called curse of the evil god cult. However, Shintaro wasn't interested in the small man in front of him and stayed close to him. Kishida thought the other party was too arrogant and immediately grinned ferociously. Konoha ninja, go to hell. He thrust the iron pick towards his opponent, but suddenly stopped. Kishida showed a shocked expression, but this was his last expression in life. Bang Shintaro's punch, filled with cursed energy and chakra, caused Kishida's chest to collapse. His whole body flew like a kite with a broken string and hit the cave wall. He didn't even look at him and turned towards Kurenai. Kurenai was surrounded by the believers, but she wasn't a weak woman. She used Genjutsu to control 5 believers in one move and killed several more with shuriken. Now she held a kunai and fought with several believers who joined forces to attack, always having the upper hand. Shintaro quickly joined the battle and cooperated with Kurenai to use physical skills to swiftly clear the believers inside the cave. There was another corridor at the end of the cave. The two came to the corridor and saw an artificial stone tunnel inside. Shintaro asked Kurenai to retreat behind him, then formed seals with his hands. Katan, Geiki no Jutsu, a large, high-temperature fireball containing powerful force, passed through the tunnel and hit the stone door. The stone gate instantly shattered and collapsed. Shintaro and Kurenai then quickly passed through the tunnel and reached the deeper cave. Before fully entering the cave, Shintaro smelled the scent of sulfur from the hot spring mixed with the rusty smell of blood. Entering the inner cave, there was a space larger than the previous one. In front was a natural hot spring bath. The hot spring was not deep and only covered the ankles. In the middle of the hot spring lay a corpse nailed to the ground with iron rivets. A circle with an outer circle and an inner triangle was drawn on the ground surrounding the body. The blood flowing from the corpse dyed most of the hot spring red, making the whole scene look bloody and eerie. And this corpse wore the same cadre uniform that Kishida had worn before. Today is the day of the evil god's sacrifice. This person and the captured trash didn't complete their mission, so he was used as a sacrifice. A man with a pale face spoke in a cold and eerie tone. 72. A twist of fate. The man wore a leather jacket and pants, his shirt open to reveal a well-defined eight-pack. His skin was pale, and his expression was ever-changing and fanatical, making him look like a zealot. The man was seated on a throne right in front of the cave, but suddenly stood up with arms outstretched and shouted in a bewitching tone. Most faithful followers of the evil god, 2 filthy Konoha ninjas have intruded into our sacred place without permission. What should you do? The remaining believers and cadres of the evil god cult gathered in the cave and immediately reacted to the man's words. Kill, 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 for the evil god, for the leader. The believers raised their hands and shouted fervently. The sound echoed within the cave, creating an unending chorus of fanatical cries. Shintaro ignored the actions of these madmen, turned to Kurenai, and said, "There are still 11 believers and 4 cadres. You deal with the believers first and leave the rest to me." Kurenai gripped her kunai tightly and nodded solemnly. She understood that this was the final battle to destroy the cult, so there could be no mistakes. Before the fanatical believers could attack, a red kunai was shot, breaking in the air and stopping the believers' cries. The believers of the evil god immediately put down their hands and glared sharply at the perpetrator. However, Kurenai was not afraid at all, and once again drew another kunai, assuming a defensive posture. The believers crowded forward and rushed toward Kurenai and Shintaro. Shintaro leapt over the ordinary believers below, heading directly for the cadres and the leader. He trusted Kurenai could handle these people, so he chose to ignore them. In midair, he twisted gracefully like a diver. Whoosh! Several shuriken pierced the sky, attacking the 4 cadres below. 2 of the cadres were instantly killed by the shuriken. One cadre's neck was grazed, grateful to have escaped, only for a shuriken from behind to stab into the back of his neck, causing him to collapse by the hot spring. The last cadre was the strongest and the luckiest. He dodged the frontal shuriken attack, and seeing the shuriken coming from behind in his field of vision, he leaned forward and fortunately avoided the blade. However, his luck ended there. Shintaro appeared in front of the cadre and used the same strike as he did in the previous cave. Thus, this cadre met the same death as Kishida. Shintaro shook his head slightly. He initially judged the cadre's strength to be between Genin and Chunin based on their chakra aura. However, the cadre's performance was truly unsightly. He thought that these rogue ninjas were not as good as Konoha ninjas who had undergone comprehensive training since childhood, resulting in poor awareness and combat skills. After Shintaro finished dealing with the miscellaneous warriors, he looked at the final boss of the evil god cult leader. Faced with the death of all his cadres, the leader showed no trace of sadness or fear. Shintaro then asked, "Your subordinates are dead, and you will soon die. Are you not afraid?" Afraid? The leader was momentarily stunned upon hearing the word, then laughed heartily as if he had just heard the funniest joke in the world. Ha 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 ha. It seems you don't know. Killing and death are the goals of the evil god cult. Their deaths are also a kind of killing. It is the most sacred act in the world. They surely can serve the evil god after their deaths. The leader said while drawing a scythe from behind the throne. This scythe was blood red and more than half the length of a human. The top consisted of 3 crescent blades that gradually diminished from top to bottom, and its tail was a telescopic steel cable. It is a sacrifice for the evil god, as are you and I. After finishing his speech, the leader hurled the 3-bladed scythe at Shintaro. The 3-bladed scythe spun rapidly with great momentum. The leader's chakra aura was at the Jonin level, unlike the ordinary believers and cadres. Shintaro stepped back, and the 3-bladed scythe flew in, embedding itself into the stone slab on the ground. The leader pulled the steel cable, and the force transmitted to the 3-bladed scythe, causing it to detach from the stone's constraint and dislodge a piece of gravel. The leader retracted the steel cable, holding the 3-bladed scythe in his hand again. He rushed towards Shintaro, smiling and waving the three-bladed scythe continuously. With such an attack method, even the leader himself might not know which part he was targeting. The combination of disorganized movements and the earlier throwing of the three-bladed scythe made Shintaro realize that the other party only wanted to draw his blood. Shintaro still remembered the blood-based curse spoken by Kotaro. Blood and curses were interrelated, and it was easy for Shintaro to think of the Uchiha Clan, one of the three sorcerer families in the jujitsu world in his previous life. However, he now essentially confirmed that the so-called curse was not the curse he was thinking of. This was because the Uchiha Clan's blood manipulation technique controlled one's own blood, not relying on the blood of others. However, Shintaro was still willing to see what this so-called curse was. After all, he was the copy ninja, Uchiha Shintaro, and he would naturally become stronger as he saw more things, like the last time he saw the Nara clan's secret shadow technique and developed the Ten Shadow. So Shintaro formed a seal secretly, and his Sharingan eyes were revealed. The Jinjutsu was activated, and the leader immediately showed a surprised expression, stopping and returning to the ground from the hot spring, licking the three-bladed scythe. Then he used the blade to cut his arm, letting the blood flow to the ground, and using his foot to draw a circle on the ground with a circle outside and a triangle inside. The leader forced Shintaro back with the three-bladed scythe, and at the same time pulled out a dark and sharp iron drill from his sleeve. "Evil God, I will offer you 2 sacrifices." Thunk, the iron drill pierced the left chest, and blood spurted, splashing onto the leader's face. The leader had a look of satisfaction and happiness on his face, but he soon realized something was wrong. "How is this possible? You haven't died." The leader's life quickly faded. He shouted his last words reluctantly and then knelt on the ground. Shintaro approached the leader and said calmly, "You are not worthy to die with me." He ensured that the leader was dead, then looked back to see that Kurenai had also eliminated the last 10 believers. Kurenai came to Shintaro's side and looked at the leader's body, which was continuously bleeding on the ground. "Everything should be settled, right?" Shintaro smiled and nodded slightly, patting her shoulder and said, "Good job." Kurenai then looked at him with a strange gaze. Shintaro understood and stepped forward to hug her. "I won't forget this either." At that moment, Kurenai finally smiled. Shintaro then walked to the leader's throne, and his 6 eyes told him there was something unusual here, and perhaps the secret of the evil god cult was hidden here. He looked up and saw the pattern of a circle with a triangle inside on the wall behind, then turned and twisted the throne. With 2 clicks, the wall behind slowly began to separate, and the stones kept rubbing against the ground. The pattern on the wall split in half, revealing a passage in the middle. It seemed there was a cave inside. They both entered, Kurenai still on alert, and Shintaro's expression was not good because he had already seen what was inside. They entered the deepest part of the cave, greeted by a strange and nauseating smell. They saw a statue at the deepest part of the cave, and many corpses piled up haphazardly in front of the statue. The way these people died was by being nailed to death with iron hammers. 120 innocent bodies. This is the blood debt committed by the evil god cult, Shintaro said heavily. Kurenai covered her mouth in shock. Shintaro stepped over the bodies and found a hidden compartment beneath the evil god statue. After opening the hidden compartment, there was a detailed ancient book recording the curse, Jujitsu, Shurji Haiketsu. Shurji Haiketsu was the curse the leader wanted to use to kill each other. By licking the enemy's blood, they could complete the connection between the 2 people, and both would be injured and die together within the circle. As for manipulating blood, a puppet was used to achieve the effect of controlling the blood's owner. I thought it was the Uchiha Clan's blood manipulation technique, but I didn't expect it to be more like the curse technique of soul worship. In addition to the ancient books, Shintaro also found several human experiment records in this cave. The evil god cult seemed to be conducting immortality experiments, trying to create an immortal human body so it could cooperate well with the Shurji Haiketsu technique. He burned these sinful books to ashes and said, "Stop causing trouble for the world, evil god." Then a kunai shot and shattered the evil god statue. Shintaro saw a certain power dissipate from the evil god statue. This might be the source of the curse's power and the immortality experiments. It seems this world is not simple, he thought to himself. At the same time, in the courtyard of a wealthy family in Uchiha, a young boy with silver gray hair and lavender eyes stood dazed under the moonlight. He was only 2 or 3 years old and didn't look very bright. Haydn, what are you doing out here so late at night? The mother of the boy named Haydn ran out anxiously. Haydn was quickly scolded for not sleeping properly. The mother was very worried about Haydn. The child had a strange temperament and wasn't very smart. She was concerned that Haydn would cause her trouble in the future. "Mom, I want to be a ninja," Haydn suddenly said. The mother immediately agreed and said, "All right, can you sleep first?" Haydn then nodded in agreement. The mother then looked at the sleeping Haydn with a complicated expression. "I don't know if it will be a blessing or a curse for this child to become a ninja. Sometimes, fate often changes without being noticed." 73. The man who fought the first Hokage Shintaro and Kurenai returned to the city after eradicating the evil god cult and led the mayor and townspeople back to the evil god cult's cave. The townspeople were shocked by the bloody scene of corpses scattered on the ground. When Shintaro and the townspeople arrived at the deepest cave, the townspeople were initially terrified. However, upon learning that these were the kidnapped sacrifices of the evil god cult, they rushed in frantically, searching for their family members and friends. Seeing this, the mayor sighed deeply, then knelt down facing Shintaro and Kurenai. The two quickly helped the old man up. The mayor said, "If it weren't for the two of you, I fear no one would have found the rotting remains here. We don't yet know the names of our 2 benefactors. Could you tell us?" Shintaro and Kurenai answered honestly. Unexpectedly, the mayor showed a surprised expression. "I didn't expect the benefactors to be the famous geniuses of Konoha." Calling them famous was certainly the mayor's praise. However, Shintaro had indeed gained fame in the ninja world, especially since the embarrassing incident of Sunagakure village in Pakura had spread. Because the land of hot water is a friendly neighbor to Konoha, Shintaro's reputation might have spread here earlier. To express his gratitude to the two, the mayor asked them to stay after returning to the city to face the impact. First, a grand banquet was held to express gratitude for destroying the heretical cult. Later, Shintaro and Kurenai were invited to stay and enjoy a 3-day trip to the hot spring town for free. Finally, the two left the land of hot water with farewells. Shintaro and Kurenai set off on their journey back to Konoha, but were stopped by an uninvited guest shortly after entering the land of fire. Shintaro had sensed this person's aura outside the banquet. At that time, he was merely curious how such a strong person could be in a small place like the hot spring town. Unexpectedly, this strong man was targeting the two of them, or Shintaro himself. The other man had black hair, wore a gray turban, and a black mask similar to Kakashi's. His eyes were red with green pupils, which looked very sinister, and the forehead protector on his forehead indicated he was a rogue ninja from Takigakure village. S rank. He is the S-rank rogue ninja Kaku. Rogue ninjas from various countries would be wanted by the entire ninja world, and there weren't many S-rank rogue ninjas in the whole ninja world, so they had a certain impression of their opponents. After seeing the man's appearance clearly, Shintaro said to Kurenai, "He must be targeting me. Kurenai, you can't help me if you stay here. Quickly find reinforcements while I hold him off." In fact, he just didn't want Kurenai to stay here and increase risk. However, there was a ninja fortress in Konoha at the border of the Land of Fire, so he wasn't lying to her. Kurenai knew her strength was far inferior to Shintaro's, so she immediately ran toward the border after hearing this. Kakuzu did not take action to stop Kurenai. He was confident he could kill Shintaro before reinforcements arrived. 10 million Ryo. This is the bounty set by Sunagakure village. Kakuzu spoke and revealed his purpose. "So you're here for the bounty. Are you a bounty hunter?" Shintaro seemed unfazed. "Exactly. I've seen many geniuses like you in the past few decades. Most of them are dead, and you're no exception." Kakuzu was confident the other party would die. Shintaro chuckled and asked, "You speak so anciently, as if you're half dead. How old are you?" Kakuzu chuckled and said, "It's natural for juniors in Konoha not to know me. If you ask about my age, I can only tell you that I once fought the first Hokage." He seemed to wait for Shintaro to show his surprise and then amuse himself with it. However, Shintaro's expression remained calm. Kakuzu was slightly surprised and said, "Aren't you surprised? I fought the first Hokage and survived. Don't you know the strength of the first Hokage?" Shintaro smiled faintly and said, "I'm not surprised. I know the first Hokage was very strong, but maybe you just saw him on the battlefield and boasted about it." Kakuzu's eyes sharpened. "Humph, you're courting death." Shintaro also concealed his smile and said coldly, "You're the one. After living for so long, it's time to die." Curse technique lapse. Shintaro used blue to immediately pull Kakuzu toward him and punched with his right hand, which was condensed with immense cursed energy and chakra. Bang, a powerful punch struck Kakuzu's chest. An ordinary person would be dead, but Kakuzu was a seasoned veteran who had been in the ninja world for decades. He instantly formed a hand seal and used earth element to cover his entire body with a black hardening effect. He was knocked away and sucked back in an instant. Another punch sent him flying far. However, 2 consecutive punches directly knocked him to the brink of death. He vomited blood, his internal organs shook violently, and his stomach churned. Shintaro wanted to repeat the trick, but Kakuzu suppressed the urge to vomit and used his foot to solidly absorb himself to the ground by condensing chakra. "It seems your life hasn't been in vain." Seeing him quickly find a way to deal with it, Shintaro sighed and acknowledged his opponent's experience. Kakuzu's eyes no longer showed the previous disdain and pride, but were replaced by shock. "What kind of power is this? Why do you have it?" "Damn, the intelligence from the bounty only mentioned you were a Jonin, but there was no information about this." He was shocked and confused, and even the greed in his heart somewhat diminished. Shintaro didn't answer this question, but said, "Your strength isn't as good as the third Hokage's. How did you survive the first Hokage?" Suddenly, Kakuzu's back cracked open, and many black tendrils protruded from him. Then 2 masked monsters condensed from the black tendrils appeared behind him. The mouths of the 2 masked monsters each condensed a large amount of fire element and wind element. "How strong I am! You can experience it yourself." Kitan. Zukaftan, Atsugai. The fire element masked monster released a highly compressed fireball, which instantly expanded in the air and became a sea of fire. The sea of fire combined with a wind explosion formed by the high-pressure wind ball released by the wind element masked monster. Strong winds and a sea of fire swept through, destroying the ground, flowers, plants, and trees in front of them. But Shintaro merely stretched out his hand to counter. Kakuzu thought he had succeeded, but when the firelight dissipated, the other party stood intact in the vast open space scorched by the sea of fire. He couldn't comprehend it, but was extremely shocked. Kakuzu took several steps back in shock and retrieved the tentacle monsters behind him, feeling his life was threatened. Shintaro's 6 eyes flickered, and he saw Kakuzu using a secret technique to modify his own blood vessels to steal hearts from others for his own use. At this moment, Kakuzu utilized the other party to analyze intelligence and take action again. His right arm quickly extended, and black tentacles protruded again. The masked monsters with the 3 elements of wind, fire, and lightning gathered in front. The 3 types of chakra mixed into one, and finally, a terrifying chakra cannon was fired simultaneously. The thick chakra cannon directly pierced through the air, and even the ground below was eroded by the hot air wave generated by the move. When the dust and smoke cleared, the trail on the ground was 100 meters long and 3 to 4 meters wide, and the entire affected area was scorched. However, Shintaro remained unharmed. Kakuzu was in despair. "Simple and crude tricks like yours might harm others. You're still too young to deal with me." Shintaro, who hadn't lived as long as Kakuzu in 2 lifetimes, commented sharply. Kakuzu extended all the tendrils from his body, writhing and twisting to protect his body, while also readying himself to flee. Although his strength wasn't very superior, the fact that he could survive in the crisis-ridden ninja world for decades showed he still had skills. Unfortunately, Kakuzu's luck was bad this time. Black Flash, Shintaro used blue to pull himself toward Kakuzu, and in an instant, he was in front. His fist was filled with cursed energy, and he punched. When the punch and cursed energy exploded one after another in a delay of 0.0001 seconds, space would distort, and cursed energy would emit a black light, which was the Black Flash. The power of Black Flash was 2.5 times the normal force. The conditions to trigger Black Flash are too harsh, so no one could deliberately use Black Flash. However, there is a significant difference in the core abilities of cursed techniques between those who can use Black Flash and those who cannot. And Shintaro is now like the sky and the clouds. The black tendrils released by Kakuzu's body defense were all destroyed, and his fist struck his chest. Black Flash spread throughout his body, and then the masks inside Kakuzu's body exploded one by one. Only one heart with the earth element remained intact. Shintaro took his heart and crushed it. I don't know if Kakashi's new ninjutsu has been developed. It should be easy to use to deal with earth element. He muttered to himself, but Kakuzu, who had fallen to the ground, could no longer hear any sound. The person who fought against the first Hokage has died. 74. The gift in Shiro the fact is Kakuzu died unjustly. He had already become the strongest enemy Shintaro had ever faced in this world. Terumi, Mei, and Pakura, who were once strong opponents, were not actually as strong as Kakuzu. However, when they fought him, Shintaro didn't try his hardest for various reasons. Kakuzu faced Shintaro, who did not hesitate to use the Limitless technique with all his might. Additionally, Kakuzu had never seen the Limitless technique before due to 2 reasons: poor information and Shintaro's temporary breakthrough with the Black Flash. That's why an S-class rogue ninja, who had been in the ninja world for years, easily fell into the hands of Konoha rookie, Uchiha Shintaro. Shintaro gazed at the clouds in the sky with 6 eyes beside Kakuzu's body. After half a day, Kurenai arrived with support from the border camp. Kakuzu's body felt cold. The fight between the two ended too quickly, and the border fort was somewhat far from here. Even if Kurenai rushed at full speed, the round trip would take more than half an hour. Shintaro turned and saw Kurenai's shocked expression and all the Konoha ninjas. The prominent Konoha ninja opened his mouth wide and couldn't close it for a long time. Kurenai immediately came to Shintaro's side and carefully checked him up and down, left and right, and found that Shintaro was uninjured. She then turned to look at the wide-open space and scorched ground around them that had been destroyed by Kaku. Kurenai tilted her head, her confused expression very cute. "Oh, he did this, then I killed him," Shintaro explained casually. Kurenai clearly did not believe him, but since the other party intentionally hid it, she did not dig deeper. Among the reinforcements that came, their leader wore a Konoha Jonin uniform. He was a middle-aged man with 2 red fangs on his face and a blue turban on his head. With this appearance, one could tell he was a member of the Uchiha Clan. "I heard Minato say that you were a genius before. I thought you were just an ordinary genius, but I didn't expect you to have become this strong." Shintaro looked at the ninja from the Uchiha Clan and said humbly, No, I'm not that strong. You killed an S-class rogue ninja and say you're not strong enough. Then you have very high standards." The ninja shook his head and said, "By the way, my name is Inuzuka Gaku, and I am a former teammate of Minato. The person you killed was Kakuzu, the villain who tried to kill the first Hokage and killed all the senior officials of Takegakure to seize their secret techniques." Gaku once again confirmed that the Kakuzu Shintaro dealt with was no ordinary ninja. Shintaro felt nothing but a little surprise and said, "So what he said about fighting the first Hokage was true." Gaku smiled helplessly, squatted on the ground to confirm Kakuzu's death, then stood up and said, "Rogue ninjas of this level have a high bounty. Kakuzu should be worth more than 30 million ryo. Akio will go to Tanegakure village to claim the reward for you. This is worth the reward of dozens of S-level missions. It looks like you're now a rich man." Shintaro smiled. The so-called sense of achievement from killing famous and powerful people was not as real as money. What's a bit funny is that when Kakuzu was passing through a hot spring town, he heard that the town was holding a banquet for Konoha's genius ninja, and then he suddenly became interested in making money by killing Shintaro. Kakuzu's body was handed over to Gaku and the others, and Shintaro left with Kurenai. The two did not return to Konoha directly. "Remember when I said I would take you somewhere?" Shintaro asked on the way. Kurenai nodded. "It has something to do with cats, right?" "Yes, I will take you to see Granny Cat." Shintaro finally stopped lying. Kurenai asked, "Granny Cat, is she a human or a cat?" "Ha ha ha, of course she's human." Shintaro laughed. Kurenai punched him in embarrassment. "Don't laugh." Although this punch landed, its damage was almost zero, but unfortunately, Kakuzu's attack did not touch Shintaro. "Actually, this is my first time going there." Granny Cat is the intelligence source of the Uchiha Clan and has a shop that customizes ninja equipment. So basically, every member of the Uchiha Clan knows the route there. Shintaro explained. Under his lead, the two came to a dilapidated and abandoned city in the Land of Fire and found a deep alley in the city. The two entered. Kurenai followed him and said a little uneasily, "It looks very desolate here." Shintaro explained, "Because this place is not meant for people to stay." It was a voice with a strange tone coming from the front. "I am really sorry for making you uncomfortable." In front, a pale white cat with brown and yellow patterns squatted and opened its mouth. "The cat talks." Kurenai looked surprised. Shintaro explained, "This is a ninja cat. It can not only talk, but also fight." The cat said, "My name is Naniko. What are you here for?" Shintaro stepped forward and took out a small bottle from his hand and handed it to the ninja cat. "I am Uchiha Shintaro from the Uchiha Clan. I came to Granny Cat to adopt a cat." "Polygonum bottle. It seems you know a lot about it." "Okay, then I will take you there." Naniko took the polygonum bottle and put it in his blue clothes, then turned around, turning his head to let them follow him. Naniko led the two from one corner to another, and then they arrived at the shop where Granny Cat was. Granny Cat had long gray furry hair, which looked like a gray umbrella on the back of her head. She wore black cat ears on her head and sat on a red round carpet in front of the window, surrounded by dozens of cats of various types. Her name, as Granny Cat, was very fitting. "You're Uchiha Shintaro. This is your first time coming to my place." Shintaro and Kurenai greeted politely. Granny Cat praised, "A talented person, and the girl is also beautiful." Kurenai smiled shyly at the compliment. Shintaro looked at her with a chuckle, then said to Granny Cat, "We are here to adopt a cat. Do you want a ninja cat or an ordinary cat?" Granny Cat asked while petting the kitten beside her. Shintaro looked at her again, so Kurenai answered, "An ordinary cat will do." Granny Cat then ordered Naniko to gather the ordinary cats here. The whole shop was almost filled with all kinds of cats, and Kurenai was fascinated. "You can choose by yourself. Take one back and take good care of it for me." Kurenai nodded seriously, squatting down and petting the cats below with a surprised smile on her face. There are so many cats. She touched the cats one by one and seemed to like them all. But at this moment, her eyes lit up, and she seemed to have found a special one. It was a white kitten that seemed to be only 6 or 7 months old. It had snow-white fur and ruby eyes. Kurenai picked up the kitten and stroked its soft fur, then turned to Shintaro happily. Shintaro also looked at her gently, and their eyes met. Kurenai said happily, "This kitten is so cute. Its white hair is like yours, and its red eyes are like mine. It's like us." She was halfway through her sentence when she realized her words were a bit too bold, and she immediately swallowed the last 2 words. Shintaro didn't notice and said with a smile, "Then let's take this one." He then looked at Granny Cat. Granny Cat nodded and let the other cats go and said, "This is a 6-month-old male cat. You can take it back to Konoha and raise it well." "Does it have a name?" Shintaro asked. Granny Cat shook her head, so Shintaro and Kurenai decided to name it right away. "Shiro, how about Shiro?" The name was proposed by Kurenai, not Shintaro. When Shintaro heard this, he immediately smiled and said, "What a nice name." With that, the two returned to Konoha with their adopted kitten, Shiro. 75. The ninja world wore Shintaro and Kurenai returned to Konoha. The two decided to let Shiro stay at the Uchiha residence most of the time. If they both had missions, they would place Shiro at Shikaku's house for care. Therefore, they specifically decided to bring Shiro to Shikaku's house so that Shiro could adapt to the environment first and visit Shikaku and his wife. Shikaku's wife, Nara Yoshino, also seemed to like cats very much. She hugged Shiro and hummed like a child. Shintaro joked from the side, "Madam, aren't you planning to have a child with Shikaku-sensei soon?" Yoshino looked up and raised her eyebrows, saying, "Of course I have plans. I even asked Shikaku to stop smoking to prepare for pregnancy. Then I wish you a baby soon," Shintaro said while petting Shiro. Yoshino smiled and thanked him, then told Shintaro that Shikaku was in the study while she went to the yard with Shiro in her arms to play with the cat together with Kurenai. Shintaro came to the door of the study. When Shikaku heard the movement, he said, "Come in directly." Shintaro pushed the door open and entered. "Shikaku-sensei." He noticed that Shikaku's expression seemed a little serious. Shikaku realized this and gestured for Shintaro to sit down. "Did you just return to Konoha?" "Yes." Hearing this answer, Shikaku nodded and said nothing. Seeing this, Shintaro asked, "What happened?" Shikaku then said, "We have officially started a war with Sunagakure." Shintaro was slightly surprised and said, "Why so soon?" Shikaku analyzed. Maybe they felt that their plan to attack Konoha had been exposed, so they scrapped their initial plan and surprised us when no one was prepared. It's not over yet. It seems that Kumogakure will take action. It's said that this time the son of the third Reikage and the Jinchuriki of the Eight Tails will lead the troops, and Kumogakure seems to be coming out in full force, and their target is Konoha. Hokage-sama just held a Jonin meeting, and all the Jonin in the village have stopped their missions and are waiting for orders. I will be transferred to the battlefield in a few days. Shintaro nodded silently and thought to himself, it seems that Konoha will be fighting 1 against 2, but Konoha, as the strongest ninja village, doesn't even have any allies. He had stayed in Konoha for more than a few years and felt that something was wrong with Konoha's current policies. It's just that he was still too young and not strong enough before. So he didn't think he could change this. But now, Shintaro had reached considerable heights, and some of his actions could now directly or indirectly change the situation in the ninja world. As the news of his killing Kakuzu spread to Konoha, Shintaro's reputation in Konoha had changed from a rookie to a new powerhouse. Therefore, he already put himself in the position of a superior person to think about these problems. Maybe Shintaro could change this in the future. Shikaku was silent for a while and then changed the topic, saying, "I heard that you killed the S-class rogue ninja Kakuzu. It seems you've gotten stronger again. I will write a recommendation letter for you and recommend you to become a Jonin. If successful, you only need to pass the Jonin assessment to be promoted to Jonin. At that time, you will be the youngest Jonin in Konoha's history." Shintaro said gratefully, "Thank you, Shikaku-sensei." Shikaku waved his hand and said, "Who's asking me to be your teacher? Come on, let's play a game of shogi." Shintaro stayed at Shikaku's house and played shogi. The two won or lost, so they played another game, and Shikaku won. Shikaku wiped the cold sweat from his forehead, couldn't stop, and commented, "Your shogi skills have improved again." He was afraid he would fall if he went further. Fortunately, it was time for dinner, and Yoshino had prepared the dinner table. Shikaku and his wife left Shintaro and Kurenai for dinner. Yoshino also made a bowl of fish sauce for Shiro and placed the cat bowl in front of Shiro. Shiro stuck out his small tongue and licked the fish in the bowl. After finding it delicious, he buried his whole head in the bowl. The 4 people at the dining table also enjoyed their meal. During the war, such a warm daily life was rare. A few days later, Shikaku as a Jonin and his teammates were transferred to the western defense line of the Land of Fire, where the war situation was most serious, to face the attack of Sunagakure. Although Yoshino was usually tough on Shikaku, she was also a woman who deeply loved her husband. On the day Shikaku went to the front line, Yoshino cried. Shintaro and Kurenai were also present at that time. They had never seen this strong woman lose her composure like this. But Shikaku still left. He couldn't disobey orders, and he also actively chose to complete his mission of protecting his family and country. After Shikaka left, Yoshino knelt weakly in front of her house door, unable to get up for a long time. Shintaro and Kurenai watched and felt uncomfortable, but such things continued to happen in Konoha. Tsunagekyu's invasion of Konoha was just the small beginning of the Ninja World War. But when a grain of the times falls on someone's head, it becomes a heavy mountain that makes people breathless. Kurenai couldn't help but put herself in Yoshino's situation and began to feel the same way. She wondered if Shintaro received an order to rush to the battlefield, whether she would cry as hard as Yoshino. Kurenai thought she might cry even harder. Shintaro beside her did not think about this. What he thought was that Konoha, as the strongest ninja village, had fallen to the point where Tsunagekyo dared to attack boldly. What he felt was a sense of suffocation. Shintaro thought about the history he learned during his time in ninja school. He thought of that time when the first Hokage captured the Bijou alone and held the 5 Kage summit to distribute the Bijou. Konoha also won the following 2 ninja world wars. Logically, even if Konoha couldn't claim to unify the ninja world, it shouldn't be attacked by other villages again. But the fact is that not only did Tsunagekyo plan to attack Konoha, but Kumogakure in the northeast and Kirigakure in the southeast also planned to attack Konoha. The village of Iwagakure in the Land of Earth, located to the northwest, might not be good either and might also have the idea of attacking Konoha. Shintaro had lived in Konoha since he was 5 years old and was now nearly 12. Over the years, he had long regarded Konoha as his hometown in this world. There were many people he cared about living here. There was Shinku, who always selflessly took care of him, and Kurenai, who always accompanied him through his lonely times. This father and daughter were the people Shintaro was most grateful to in this village. The Uchiha Clan wasn't bad to him, and although there were some conflicts initially, they later disappeared. The leader of the Uchiha Clan, Fugaku, was also kind to him. Although Shintaro could see that the other party had goals, at least he also helped him a lot. There were also the stingy guys who still kept in touch in the days after graduation. Then there were some friends in the ninja school, such as Kakashi, who once was the best genius in Konoha with him, and Asuma, who once had conflicts with him and later resolved their bond, etc. Because of these people in Konoha, Shintaro was no longer a loner in this world. Therefore, Konoha was very important in his heart. Now that Konoha was under threat from all sides, Shintaro was not only angry at those enemies, but also felt a bit disgusted with the inaction of Konoha's higher-ups. One day, I will change Konoha. 76. Will of Fire Shintaro and Kurenai stayed with Yoshino until she recovered her composure before saying their goodbyes. On their way, Shintaro said, Shikaku-sensei has gone to the battlefield. I'm worried Yoshino-san will feel lonely at home. If you have time in the future, please take Shiro to keep Yoshino-san company. Kurenai nodded understandingly and said, I know, I'm not stupid. Shintaro smiled, but his smile soon hardened. Suddenly, an ANBU wearing a black hooded cloak and an animal mask appeared before them both. Uchiha Shintaro, Hokage-sama calls you. Please go to the Hokage building immediately. Understood. After receiving Shintaro's reply, the ANBU quickly departed. Kurenai frowned and looked at him worriedly. After all, being called by the Hokage during wartime wasn't a good sign. Kurenai was worried that Shintaro, like Shikaku, would also be sent to the most dangerous battlefield. Shintaro gently placed his hand on Kurenai's shoulder. No matter what orders the Hokage gives me, you don't need to worry. Because I'm strong, understand? Hearing this, Kurenai's eyes welled up with tears. She bit her pale pink lip and said, I'm sure you'll be fine. Shintaro nodded, wiped the tears from Kurenai's eyes with his fingers, then turned and headed to the Hokage building. Upon reaching the Hokage's office, he knocked on the door. It seems I'll have to send you to deal with Kumogakure again. Come in. Hiruzen's voice came from inside. Shintaro pushed the door open and saw a familiar face inside. Besides the Hokage, it was Minato. Shintaro, you're here. Hiruzen waved and gently called him over. Hokage-sama. Shintaro bowed slightly. Shintaro then greeted Minato, Minato-san. Minato also smiled gently and nodded. Shintaro, I have read the Jonin recommendation letter given by Shikaku. Your strength has indeed reached the Jonin level. I have always been optimistic about your talent. You will certainly become a pillar of Konoha in the future and an outstanding successor to the Will of Fire. Hiruzen spoke directly, then changed the topic. However, you are only 11 years old. You are too young and lack experience, so I do not approve of your promotion to Jonin. Shintaro had killed the S-class rogue ninja Kakuzu, but he was not promoted to Jonin. Using age and experience as reasons was absurd. A ninja's strength is never measured by age, and in terms of experience, Shintaro had completed 2 S-rank missions. Shintaro scoffed internally but kept a calm face and lowered his head, saying, I understand Hokage-sama's intentions. Hiruzen nodded happily and then revealed his purpose. So, I decided to let you train for another year, and then you can be promoted to Jonin after gaining enough experience. Sunagakure has fully invaded, and Kumogakure in the northeast has also made some moves. I hope you can go to the Northeast Fire Nation defense line as a garrison. After 1 year, I will approve you to officially become Jonin. Coincidentally, Minato is going there to strengthen the defense. Minato, you are a senior. You and Shintaro should take good care of each other when you arrive. Understood. I will take good care of Shintaro. Minato answered respectfully. Shintaro then asked, Then, can the assistant duty with Orochimaru-sama be suspended? Hiruzen smiled and said, You didn't know? Orochimaru was assigned by me to be the commander of the Northeast Defense Line a few days ago before you returned to Konoha. It also applies to you going there to be his assistant. Shintaro then had no more doubts. Hiruzen then informed him of the specific arrangements. Gather in front of the Hokage building at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, and then Minato will lead a total of 500 troops to the Northeast headquarters, coordinated by Orochimaru. Understood. After Shintaro bowed slightly, he bid farewell to both of them and left, as Hiruzen indicated. After Shintaro left, Hiruzen sighed and said to Minato, Uchiha Shintaro's talent is truly too strong, a bit too strong. Minato looked at him with a complicated expression. After hesitating for a moment, he said, Hokage-sama, I think Shintaro is a good kid. There's no need to do this. Hiruzen lowered his head, and his expression was unclear. Shintaro may be a good kid, but the will of fire in his heart is not strong enough. Minato, you must further cultivate Shintaro's will of fire at the Kumogakure defense line. If he is willing to break free from the constraints of his clan, embrace the will of fire like Uchiha Kagami did, and work hard for the village, then I can trust him fully like the second Hokage did. Minato, do you understand what I'm saying? Hiruzen raised his eyes and looked at Minato. Minato solemnly replied, Understood, Hokage-sama. I will apply and teach the will of fire to Shintaro. Hiruzen nodded in satisfaction. Minato, I have always been very optimistic about you. Among all my disciples, you are the best. You must work hard. Perhaps after this war, you can become the next great successor of the Hokage position. Minato looked forward to it in his eyes, and he bowed and said, Thank you, Hokage-sama, for your training. Hiruzen was no longer young, and he had more than once expressed his thoughts on the next Hokage. Minato was clearly considered by Hiruzen as a very suitable candidate for the next Hokage. By the way, how is Kakashi's strength now? Hiruzen asked again. Minato replied, Kakashi's talent is also very strong, and he is involved in all 5 elements, but he excels in earth and lightning elements. He is developing a lightning element ninjutsu, and his potential is no less than my Rasengan. Hiruzen had always been optimistic about geniuses who excelled in learning ninjutsu, including Orochimaru and now Kakashi. Yes, then he should be strong enough to be a Jonin, right? I plan to promote him to Jonin. Hiruzen showed his expectation for Kakashi's strength to grow. However, Minato's answer disappointed him. It's still too early to be promoted to Jonin now. At least he should wait until his new technique is successfully developed. Perhaps he could be promoted to Jonin next year. Hiruzen sighed, agreeing with Minato's statement, and then gestured for him to leave. After Minato left, Hiruzen leaned back in his chair and murmured to himself. Jiraiya once said that no one compares to Namikaze Minato. This sentence also applies to Uchiha Shintaro. But you are different after all. Minato comes from a civilian background, while Shintaro, he comes from the Uchiha Clan. The will of fire of Konoha still cannot be passed on to you. 77. Farewell, Shintaro returned to Yui's house. Before he could leave through the entrance, Kurenai ran anxiously to his side. Shintaro, what did Hokage-sama want from you? Shintaro changed shoes and answered. It's nothing, it's just that my Jonin didn't approve my promotion, and then he sent me to the northeastern border. Kurenai sensed an inexplicable bitterness in his words and asked again, So when are you leaving? I'll leave tomorrow. Shintaro approached her and answered. They both walked to the living room. Shintaro sat on the sofa and said, I'll meet at 9 tomorrow morning and then depart. So urgent? The northeastern border, then you have to fight the Kimogakure ninja. Kurenai couldn't help but worry again. Shintaro took her hand and said, Don't worry, I'm very strong. Besides, I'm not the only one there. 500 ninjas are going with me alone. Orochimaru and Minato are there. There won't be any danger. Kurenai was a bit shy, but didn't pull her hand away. After a moment of silence, she said, I know, but after you leave, I'll be the only one left in my family. My father was transferred a few days ago. Shintaro gently stroked her hand and said, Kurenai, you have to be strong. This happens during the war. When Uncle Shinku and I leave, you have to take care of yourself. This time, Kurenai held back her tears, raised her head, and said seriously, I am a Konoha ninja. Don't underestimate me. I will take care of myself. Shiro jumped onto the sofa at this moment, tilting his head as if to see what the two were doing. Shintaro felt relieved, seeing Kurenai was aware. After both of them calmed down, Kurenai realized what she was doing and withdrew her hand. She bowed her head and didn't dare to look at him, her ears already red. Shintaro said with a smile, It's late. Let's go out for dinner tonight. Kurenai nodded and asked, Still barbecue? I'm not having barbecue today. I can't let you eat barbecue with me every day. Shintaro said, Let's go to your favorite seafood restaurant that sells wasabi octopus. Kurenai happily agreed, but still asked him to wait on the sofa. She first ran to the kitchen and made a bowl of cat rice with fresh shrimp, minced chicken, chicken liver, and chicken hearts. She also whisked an egg on top and steamed it over water. After making the cat food and putting it on the floor, Kurenai ran to the bathroom and stayed there for a while. Shintaro walked towards Shiro and squatted out of boredom. Shiro was engrossed in eating the cat rice, looking as wild as usual. Shintaro held Shiro's neck, and Shiro began to meow, as if asking for Kurenai's help in the bathroom. Shintaro ignored Shiro's cries for help, maintaining his posture with one hand and reaching the other towards Shiro's cat bowl. Not bad, but bland. Shintaro then released Shiro and put him down. Shiro fell to the ground in surprise. At this moment, the bathroom door opened. Kurenai, with her wet hair scattered, leaned her half-wrapped body in a white bath towel and asked, What's wrong with Shiro? Nothing. He just bit his shrimp. Shintaro squatted on the ground and turned to answer. Kurenai looked at him and said, Are you competing for food with a cat? As she went back in. It took almost an hour to bathe and dry her hair, and half an hour to choose and change clothes. Fortunately, Kurenai was still young and didn't need makeup. Otherwise, it would take another hour. She had slightly curly hair, and her black hair covered her shoulders, emitting a faint floral fragrance. A white scarf covered the top of both her arms. She wore a magenta top and a light pink skirt. Tight black leggings on her legs peeked out from under her open foot skirt. The outfit was actually similar to usual, but Shintaro didn't know why Kurenai looked so good today. He immediately forgot the boredom he felt while waiting and stared blankly at her. Kurenai giggled shyly and said, Does it look good? Shintaro nodded. It looks good. Then take a closer look. You won't need to watch any more the day after tomorrow. Kurenai pouted and turned her face aside. Shintaro waved his hand, walked towards her, and said, I'm just going to the border tomorrow. It doesn't mean I'm going to die tomorrow. Kurenai immediately turned around and interrupted seriously. Don't say such unlucky words. Shintaro immediately reached out his hand to comfort Kurenai. Okay, okay. I won't say anything anymore. Let's do this. Let's take a picture together after dinner, and I'll take it to the border so I can see you every day. Kurenai's ears turned red immediately, and she bowed her head and answered softly. They then set off as the sun set and the moon rose. Shintaro and Kurenai had a feast at the seafood restaurant, then went shopping on the street. They bought many items along the way, big and small. They both went to Yamanaka's flower shop. Shintaro bought a beautiful bouquet for Kurenai. Then they returned home. It should be mentioned that the entire cost of this date was covered by Kakuzu, or rather, it was the reward for killing Kakuzu-sen from Takigakure. Shintaro handed the money to Kurenai. At first, Kurenai refused to accept it, but when she heard Shintaro say that she and her father were his only relatives in Konoha, she no longer refused. Kurenai had just promised Shintaro that she would take good care of the money, and Shintaro smiled and said that Kurenai could use it if she wanted. The next day, Shintaro came to Yuhi's house wearing the new clothes Kurenai had chosen for him yesterday. He said his final goodbye to her, then packed his things and went to the Hokage building to assemble. Hiruzen wore the Hokage robe and the Hokage hat with the word fire on his head and gave a speech to the Konoha ninjas below. The content of the speech remained unchanged, and the theme was still the will of fire. After that, the 500-strong force departed under Minato's leadership and marched proudly through the streets, looking like warriors on an expedition. Both sides of the road were filled with people sending off the troops, and the sounds of blessings and farewells were endless. This made many young ninjas in the force who had never been on the battlefield excited and filled their hearts with longing to make achievements. The other older ninjas who had been on the battlefield before felt worried and had sad faces. They knew that the battlefield was a place of death for most, not a place to achieve merits. Shintaro's reaction was different from both of them. He felt quite calm when going to the battlefield and observed the crowd with his 6 eyes, searching for Kurenai's figure. Sure enough, Kurenai's figure was found in the crowd. Although Shintaro had said earlier that there was no need to see him off, he knew that Kurenai would still come. He reached out his hand and waved to Kurenai. In an instant, Kurenai saw him from the crowd of troops. Kurenai also waved desperately at him. At this moment, Shintaro was pushed forward by the large troops behind him, and he could only say his final goodbye to her from distance. Kurenai couldn't hear clearly, but she understood the shape of his mouth. What Shintaro said was, "Wait for me to come back." 78. The border situation, 500 ninjas immediately left the village and headed northeast. To the northeast of the Land of Fire are 2 countries, the Land of Hot Water and the Land of Iron. Both of these countries are small, and if combined, their total area is only about 1/6 or 1/7 of the Land of Fire. These 2 countries lie between the Land of Fire and the sea, as well as between the peninsula of the Land of Fire and the Land of Thunder. The Land of Thunder is located on the Land of Thunder Peninsula, and to the south of the peninsula is a small country called the Land of Frost. Although the 3 countries of Iron, Hot Water, and Frost are squeezed between the Land of Fire and the Land of Thunder, their positions are actually different. The Land of Fields is located northeast of the Land of Fire, with the sea to the north and the Land of Iron, a neutral samurai country, to the west, making it more neutral between the 2 countries. Konoha established the Northeastern Defense Line headquarters in the Land of Rivers, with a total of 4,000 troops. Additionally, 1,000 troops were deployed at the junction of the Land of Hot Water and the Land of Fire, including the 500 reinforcements currently rushing to the defense headquarters. The total Konoha force on the northeastern border is 5,500. This number is quite large, especially considering that Konoha is fighting on 2 fronts, with almost half of Konoha's combat power. This is not an ordinary army of 5,500 people, but a force of 5,500 ninjas. Any genin here can easily slaughter an entire village of ordinary people. A few dozen ninjas can capture a town, a few hundred ninjas can capture several large cities, and 1,000 ninjas can destroy a small country. and 5,500 people are a bargaining chip in the politics between the great nations. The troops arrived at the headquarters on the third day after departure and were disbanded and deployed to various small defense lines under Orochimaru's arrangement, except for Shintaro. In the command tent, Orochimaru, Shintaro, and Minato gathered. Orochimaru was explaining the current situation to Minato. After all, Minato hadn't been on this defense line for a long time, so it was natural for him to be unfamiliar with the current situation. After their conversation ended, Orochimaru turned to Shintaro, who had been silently observing, and asked, "Shintaro-kun, what do you think about the situation on the battlefield?" Shintaro looked up and saw Orochimaru's expectant expression, indicating he was eager for his answer. He pointed at the sand table with his finger and said, "Isn't our defense line at the border of the land of hot water a bit too weak and not connected with the defense line of the land of iron?" Orochimaru showed admiration in his eyes and replied, "Yes, but there's nothing we can do. We don't have enough troops, and the land of iron has declared neutrality. We can't just send troops to the garrison. Anyway, the likelihood of Kumogakure taking a detour to attack from the land of iron is very low. There is our defense line towards the land of rivers, and it is difficult to transport troops through the sea to the north, so we can only half abandon this position. But we are not unprepared. Minato's mobile unit is responsible for reinforcing the defense line. As long as the troops stationed at the border between the land of fire and the land of iron hold firm and wait for reinforcement from the mobile unit, we can attack the Kumogakure ninjas from both sides of the land of iron." Shintaro nodded in understanding, knowing that this apparent gap was already the best solution at the moment. "So, Shintaro-kun, which position would you like to be placed in?" Orochimaru's golden vertical pupils stared straight at him and asked. Shintaro thought for a moment and replied, "The front line." He planned to make a name for himself on the border battlefield, which would greatly benefit his future plans. Orochimaru looked at him deeply and said, "You must be mentally prepared. The front line is the most dangerous." Shintaro nodded earnestly and said, "I understand." Orochimaru then looked at Minato. "Then Uchiha Shintaro will be transferred to your unit, Minato." Minato agreed immediately. He had 2 units under him, one being the mobile unit stationed at the rear to prepare reinforcements for various battlefields. The other was the frontline unit responsible for frontline reconnaissance and leading assaults, consisting of 200 people. These 1,000 ninjas were all under his command. Therefore, Minato's status in the entire border force was essentially second only to Orochimaru. Although Orochimaru was a generation higher than Minato, due to the special nature of the troops under Minato's control and his rising reputation recently, sometimes people thought Minato was in charge of the defense line on this battlefield. Minato initially wanted to transfer Shintaro to the mobile unit as a reserve force, but after repeated requests from Shintaro, he was sent to the frontline unit. Shintaro was transferred to Inuzuka Gaku's team. They had met before near the border between the land of fire and the land of hot water, when Shintaro had just killed Kaku. Gaku was very impressed with him, so he greeted him warmly when they met. Shintaro responded politely, and the two started chatting amicably. Minato was also present, so Gaku pointed at Minato and said, "I remember when Minato and I were on the same Jonin team. Even though he was the captain, I still treated him as a younger brother. Now that Minato has entrusted you to me, I will treat you as my younger brother." Shintaro bowed and said, "Thank you, Inuzuka-san. With that said, why are you still being so polite?" Gaku said, waving his hand and pretending to be dissatisfied. "Gaku-san." Shintaro immediately changed his wording. Gaku laughed loudly and said to Minato, "This kid is very considerate, isn't he?" Minato smiled faintly and said, "He's been like this since he was young. All right, you guys chat first, and I'll brief you on the mission." "Okay, understood." After Gaku and Shintaro replied, Minato left. Gaku immediately brought Shintaro to the 4-man team he commanded, including 1 Jonin and 3 Chunin from Gaku, with Shintaro now being added as a Chunin. "This is the famous Uchiha Shintaro. He's now a member of our team. Come out and say hello." Gaku clapped his hands and shouted a few times. Several figures emerged from a nearby tent. Captain, you're amazing. You actually managed to get Konoha's top talent to join our team. A young ninja with a round face and a buzz cut shouted excitedly. He wasn't very old, so he probably admired Shintaro, a genius. Daichi, I'm here. Please speak more quietly. Another mature and steady-looking man patted the flat-headed ninja. Uncle Isamu, don't touch my head. I'm not tall. Daichi reacted strongly, seemingly very concerned about his height. Besides the two of them, a handsome young man emerged from the tent, rubbing his eyes. Seeing Daichi and Isamu being noisy, he complained, "You're so noisy, my head is about to explode." Woof, woof, woof. A large yellow dog also ran out to greet Shintaro's arrival. Akabane Daichi, Suzuki Isamu, Takuto Mizumoto, and my partner Komuro. These are all the members of our team, and now we'll be adding you. Gaku introduced Shintaro one by one. Shintaro bowed slightly and said, "Hello everyone, I'm Uchiha Shintaro. Please take care of me in the future." The three people opposite him looked at each other, seeming a little surprised. After all, the reputation of the Uchiha clan wasn't very good, and combined with his reputation as Konoha's #1 genius, they thought the person coming would be an arrogant genius. They didn't expect Shintaro to behave so politely. "Hello," Daichi responded quickly. "It seems our team finally has a reliable ninja," Isamu said emotionally. Takuto scratched his head and extended his hand for a handshake. Woof, woof, woof. Komuro greeted happily, wagging his tail. 79. Night attack on the first day. He joined the team. Shintaro got to know the 4 members and a dog. The first day went smoothly. Inazuka Gaku's team patrolled the front lines and returned to camp. Shintaro's front unit was usually responsible for patrolling the front lines, but since there were many teams at the front, they weren't too busy. At night, the weather was quite cold in the land of rivers in late autumn. The team gathered around a campfire outside the camp to warm themselves and heat their dinner. Dinner was packed in an aluminum lunchbox containing plum rice balls, a few thin slices of meat, some curry potatoes, and pickles. Though far from luxurious, it was still a 3-course meal. This was considered good food during the war. Shintaro quietly buried his head as he ate. This time, Daichi asked curiously, "Shintaro, why do you seem different from other Uchiha?" Isamu and Takuto also looked, expecting his answer. Shintaro then said, "My mother was a foreigner, and I take after her." Daichi suddenly nodded and said, "No wonder you're different from other Uchiha, and your personality is different too." Shintaro looked up and asked, "So what do you think of the Uchiha?" Isamu initially wanted to stop Daichi from answering this question. After all, the issue of the Uchiha was politically sensitive in Konoha, but he was stopped by Gaku, who signaled for Daichi to answer Shintaro's question honestly. Daichi, with his big heart, only expressed his inner thoughts. "I feel that most Uchiha don't get along with us. The reason might be that many Uchiha work in the security department. They seem fierce and inhuman, and most Uchiha are arrogant, so I don't like them much either. Except for you, you're still a good guy." Daichi immediately expressed his inner thoughts. Shintaro gave a slight smile, but was lost in thought. After dinner, a few were assigned a night patrol. After patrolling until late at night, they returned to the camp. It was quite crowded with 5 people squeezed into one tent, not to mention a large yellow dog. Shintaro could only sleep at the edge of the tent to feel better. In the second half of the night, stars twinkled in the night sky, and the bright moon lit up the world, as if the world had fallen asleep. Suddenly, there was a loud noise from a distance. Shintaro immediately woke up, and Gaku and Kurumu also quickly awakened. Shintaro and Gaku swiftly woke the 3 other team members and rushed out of the camp. They saw thick smoke rising high in the middle of the camp, with flames flickering below. "Something's wrong," Gaku said seriously. "That defense line is the training camp. Let's go support them quickly." Gaku immediately crouched on the ground, lying on all 4s. Chakra condensed in his palms and feet, then exploded instantly. Gaku almost instantly disappeared from his spot, leaving only 4 holes in the ground. Kuramaru rushed out at almost the same speed. Among the remaining people, only Shintaro could keep up with Gaku's speed and disappeared from his spot. Daichi immediately exclaimed, "Wow, Shintaro can run as fast as the captain." Isamu said in disbelief, "No, he might be faster than the captain." Takuto said with a sleepy expression, "We'd better catch up quickly." The three of them also started running, but they couldn't keep up with the speed of the other two. A while later, Shintaro and Gaku arrived at the training tent. Shintaro sensed Orochimaru was in the camp. With a tearing sound, the tent was ripped apart. A giant snake coiled around a ninja and lifted him high. The ninja kept struggling in the air, but to no avail. "Why betray Konoha?" Orochimaru's cold voice sounded from the tent. The ninja didn't answer, and then the giant snake tightened its body and choked the ninja until he passed out. Orochimaru retracted the giant snake, walked out of the tent, and casually lifted the ninja's collar like he was picking up a bag of trash. Orochimaru turned to Shintaro and Gaku, who had just arrived, and said, "Someone betrayed Konoha, collaborated with Kumogakure, and stole Konoha's defense map. Minato is pursuing them. You go too." "Yes." Shintaro and Gaku immediately turned around and ran. Along the way, Shintaro saw many Konoha ninjas wounded and lying on the ground, groaning, and some had lost their lives. Surely the Kumogakure ninjas who dared to infiltrate Konoha's camp at night were elite forces. After chasing for a while, Shintaro used his 6 eyes to explore and study the situation ahead. A 20-member Kumogakure team was fleeing, divided into 6 groups, and only Minato was pursuing them. But even so, the Kumogakure ninjas were captured and eliminated one by Minato. This showed how oppressive Minato's presence was on the battlefield. Shintaro then pointed in a direction, the team furthest from Minato, where they might be able to help. Gaku ran while sighing in his heart. "Why can this kid run faster on 2 legs than I can on 4? Although their speed wasn't as fast as Minato's, it was still top-notch in the ninja world. So they could still catch up with the 3 Kumogakure ninjas. Kitan, Raika no Jutsu, Shintaro spat out a dragon flame bullet towards the back of one of the ninjas. The flame bullet attacked swiftly, catching the Kumogakure ninja off guard. The Kumogakure ninja was immediately hit from behind and thrown to the ground, lying motionless with most of his body burned and out of breath. Shintaro then used a kunai to close his throat, ending the Kumogakure ninja's life. On the other side, Gaku transformed Furu into his own form. Then both crouched on the ground and started spinning at high speed into 2 tornadoes to attack the other Kumogakure ninja. The Kumogakure ninja was on guard, and he drew his sword and slashed at the tornado beside him. However, at this moment, his back was hit by the tornado behind him. Before he could change his expression, he flew out and crashed into a big tree, making no sound. But the other Kumogakure ninja didn't react at all even after his 2 teammates were killed and continued fleeing at full speed. It seemed this ninja was the type to prioritize the mission. Shintaro and Gaku were about to catch up when a special kunai flew from a distance. The kunai had 3-pronged blades and a light yellow handle. The kunai flew towards the Kumogakure ninja and hit the ground in front of him. Then Minato instantly appeared there, with a Rasengan already in his hand. Bang, the Kumogakure ninja was hit by the Rasengan and flew back more than 10 meters, landing in front of Shintaro and Gaku. His chest collapsed, his ribs punctured his heart, and a lot of blood flowed, signaling his death. Minato picked up the kunai and retrieved his ninja pouch, walking closer and saying with a smile, "Thanks for your help." 80. Hirashin no Jutsu. Is this Hirashin no Jutsu? Shintaro asked. Seeing this, Minato smiled, scratched his head, and said, "Yes, Hirashin no Jutsu is my specialty." Gaku added from the side, "What do you mean by your specialty?" "That's clearly Minato's famous technique. You know Minato's title is the Yellow Flash, right? This nickname describes his appearance when using Hirashin no Jutsu. At that time, a group of us encountered the Kumogakure ninja, which was the strongest combination of Kumogakure consisting of the 3rd Raikage Sun and the Hachibi Jinchuriki. Minato was fighting against the 2 of them. He still had the upper hand and forced them to retreat, not daring to attack. Unfortunately, Minato was too kind. Otherwise, the Hachibi Jinchuriki would have died there. Gaku spoke excitedly, as if it was his own achievement. Shintaro smiled meaningfully. He could see that Gaku already considered Minato as his little brother, so talking about Minato inevitably made him happy too. Minato humbly said, "Actually, fighting at that time was very dangerous. It feels good to have achieved such results." Shintaro didn't know the specific situation back then, but he had heard about it in the village. However, given the situation, Minato seemed to have the upper hand when facing the two. Shintaro then admired Minato's strength even more. AI was the son of the third Reikage, and the Hachibi Jinchuriki was roughly equivalent to Minato and Kushina in Konoha. The third Reikage son would undoubtedly inherit the Reikage position in the future, and according to Shintaro, Minato would also inherit the Hokage position. Shintaro had never seen the Hachibi, but he had seen the Kyuubi. He still felt fear when thinking about the Kyuubi breaking its seal back then. So, he looked curious and asked, "Then what ninjutsu did Minato-san use at that time?" "Well, the name is a bit long. It's called Rasen Senko Cho Rinbuko Sanshiki." Minato skillfully pronounced the strange name that most people couldn't say fluently after hearing it 2 or 3 times. Shintaro complained in his heart. Such a unique naming style. It's hard to imagine what his children's names will be in the future. He then begged, "Can you show it to me?" Gaku laughed and said, "I thought you were different from other young ninjas, but it turns out you really admire Minato." Shintaro smiled and said, "After all, he's the Yellow Flash." In fact, worship or not was one thing. Shintaro mainly wanted to see this trick because he wanted to imitate Hirashin no Jutsu. Shintaro had seen Minato use Hirashin no Jutsu several times, but he had only seen him teleport, or he had seen him teleport and appear, but he had never seen the entire process. Therefore, it was difficult to analyze and copy with the 6 eyes. Minato agreed immediately after hearing this, then took out 8 kunai from his ninja bag. Holding the kunai between his fingers, opened his hand, and threw them everywhere. The kunai went in all directions, some landing on the ground and others landing on trees. Then Minato exerted his chakra and disappeared instantly, appearing on the ground in the distance almost simultaneously. He retrieved the kunai and put them back into his ninja bag and disappeared again, this time appearing on a nearby tree. This continued until all the kunai were retrieved. The whole process took less than 5 seconds. Minato put away his kunai and returned to Shintaro and Gaku and said, "So, did you see clearly?" Shintaro had been engrossed with a gleam in his eyes, and he didn't realize it until Minato approached. Clearly, his tone was a bit disappointed. This made Minato feel a little embarrassed. He scratched his cheek with his finger and asked, "What? Did I disappoint you? Actually, if you had a flash bomb, it would have a better effect in surprising and confusing the enemy." Shintaro quickly shook his head and said, "No, I'm not disappointed. I was just stunned." Minato then sighed in relief. He thought he was showing off his special skill to him. Actually, Shintaro did feel disappointed, but it wasn't directed at Minato, but at Hirashin no Jutsu. Unexpectedly, cannot be copied. He was disappointed and immediately analyzed the reason. It turned out the secret of Hirashin no Jutsu wasn't how Minato moved his chakra, but merely a switch. The true initiator of Hirashin no Jutsu was the kunai. Specifically, it was the runes on the kunai. Those runes actually contained spatial power, and the secret within them couldn't be seen with just the 6 eyes. It seemed that Shintaro had no chance with Hirashin no Jutsu for now. However, this observation also inspired him. Spatial. Maybe it can be done with Limitless technique. Shintaro was thinking about how to combine the Limitless technique with the inspiration he gained from observing Hirashin no Jutsu. At this moment, Minato had found the stolen defense plan on the Kumobikure ninja's corpse. Minato called back to recover, and then interrupted Shintaro's thoughts. In the camp, Orochimaru took the defense plan handed over by Minato and praised, "As expected from you." Minato humbly said a few words, then looked at the Konoha traitor who had fallen to the ground, and asked, Why did he betray Konoha? Betrayal? No, we're all wrong. He was never a member of Konoha. His superficial identity was a war orphan in the land of rivers produced by the last ninja war. He joined Konoha to make a living. In fact, he was a spy sent by Kumogakure. Orochimaru said coldly. Shintaro observed the spy and saw that his brain seemed to be severely damaged. He probably suffered from severe memory seizures. The best scenario in the future was to turn him into an idiot. Although a bit too cruel, it wasn't surprising considering Orochimaru's behavior. Even though Minato felt such methods were somewhat harsh, he didn't elaborate on the major issue of right and wrong. Orochimaru quickly sent people to clean up the mess, care for the wounded, return the dead to Konoha, recover the Kumogakure ninjas' bodies, repair the camp's fortifications, etc. Compared to Minato, who fought on the front lines, Orochimaru's mission was more about coordinating the overall situation. Shintaro and Gaku returned to continue their sleep. The next day, the camp was still full of traces of the attack from the previous night. Two teams on patrol were completely annihilated. Several tents relatively close within the camp were thrown by Kumogakure ninja with explosive tags. The Konoha ninja inside were blown to death while still asleep. Death was very tragic. Even though it had been cleaned up, there was still a smell of blood and gunpowder in the cool morning breeze. This was the cruelty of war, and sometimes people died inexplicably. In the middle of the camp, some ninjas were repairing the damage to the commander's tent. Orochimaru was outside the camp, harshly scolding the ninja team responsible for patrolling. No matter how the person in charge explained, he was still not ready to let them go. After dealing with these people, Orochimaru began calling for ninjas, adjusting and consolidating defenses, and never letting this happen again. After that, he called for Minato. Hirashin no Jutsu 81. Reciprocity. Minato quickly arrived at the camp. As the hole in the commander's tent was being repaired, Orochimaru and Minato entered the tent and returned to the sand table. Although we thwarted Kumogakure's actions last night, it also caused significant losses for us, Orochimaru said, staring at the sand table. Minato agreed. Yes, I think the number of casualties might be in the dozens. 36 lightly injured, 9 severely injured, and 12 dead. Orochimaru, as the Supreme Commander, accurately stated the casualty report. There are also tents and fortifications that need to be replenished together. Let Kumogakure feel the consequences. Could it be that you want to? Minato had a guess in his mind. Correct. Just like them, we will attack their camp at night. Orochimaru replied, his tone calm, but also showing a hint of coldness. I plan to assign this task to you. Orochimaru suddenly looked up, catching Minato off guard. Minato did not agree immediately. He pointed to the sand table map and began to analyze. I think this is inappropriate. The reason they managed to infiltrate the camp to rescue the spy last night was not just due to the negligence of the patrolling ninjas, but also because of the terrain. There are dense forests. Additionally, it is prone to fog at night. This gives Kumogakure ninjas opportunities. The terrain is a flat, rocky highland without vegetation or even cover. Our night attack would be easily spotted, and it would be difficult to escape the enemy's pursuit. But Orochimaru turned around and waved his hand, his tone flat. That's why I'm giving this task to you. I don't care about the difficulties this mission might face. I only need to see the results. It's up to you to decide the specific details of the mission. At the latest, within 3 days, I want to see Kumogakure suffer at least 10 times the losses we did. Orochimaru then stopped talking, and Minato left reluctantly. Minato felt quite helpless because a hasty decision would cause serious losses on their side if he was not careful. He could only try his best to come up with a more stable plan to ensure the mission's completion while reducing casualties. As he worried, he thought of one person, and that was Shintaro. Maybe he can give me some advice. He found Shintaro, who was patrolling the battlefield, and explained the mission set by Orochimaru straight to the point. Shintaro first sighed in his heart. Orochimaru is indeed very unkind and insistent on his own way. Then he began to think about the dilemma Minato faced. Indeed, the terrain was an important factor. The terrain in the land of frost was sufficient for the ninjas patrolling at night to clearly see the surrounding enemies. And even if the task was completed, it would be difficult for those carrying out the task to escape, and they would need to find a very simple way. Shintaro squatted on the ground and used a tree branch to carve a simple topographic map. Minato was quite surprised by this. After all, Shintaro had only seen the battlefield map in the commander's camp. Since Kumogakure will attack at night, we should retaliate and make our move louder. Shintaro ignored Minato and talked to himself. Minato heard from his words that the other party seemed to have an idea. Kumogakure's ninja camp is here, right? Shintaro asked. Minato nodded, so Shintaro continued. This is the only highland for miles with a wide view. They must think that camping here is safe. But there's another way we can get closer. Shintaro looked up at him. Minato, being intelligent, immediately understood his meaning. You mean approaching from underground? Minato's eyes already showed a clear understanding. Yes, we can send Earth-release ninjas ahead to open a tunnel underground and enter the camp after approaching the highland. After causing damage on a certain scale, the troops will retreat in the same way and use explosive tags to blow up the tunnel entrance and block the enemy's pursuit route. Minato clapped his hands and praised. This plan is reliable. We can try it. The two then discussed the specific details of the plan and finally decided on the time and number of participants for the night attack. Minato then summoned 200 frontline troops and carefully selected 50 elites among them. Among the 50, there were 3 Jonin, including Minato. The rest were all at the Chunin and Special Jonin level, and there was not a single Genin. Among these ninjas, half were Earth-release ninjas and ninjas proficient in Earth ninjutsu. All members of Inuzuka Gaku's team were selected. The next day, at dusk, this 50-man force had made all preparations, gathered supplies, and brought a large number of explosive tags. Under Minato's leadership, everyone crossed the border of the Land of Frost and began approaching the Kumogakure camp. By the time they reached a distance where the Kumogakure camp could be seen with the naked eye, it was already night. Everyone hid on a gentle slope, observing the Kumogakure camp on the horizon. Minato ordered, "Stop advancing, start digging here, and pay attention to concealment." At this distance, it was still possible to be discovered if they were not careful, so everyone hid behind the slope and started digging. This not only hid their figures, but also concealed the dugout gravel and soil. Shintaro continued to use Earth Release to break the ground. Daichi, beside him, was an Earth Release ninja. He also used Earth Ninjutsu to break the hard rocky soil into gravel and debris. Compared to other Earth Release ninjas, Daichi's achievement in Earth Ninjutsu was considered outstanding. Next to Daichi was Karamu, who helped dig the soil with his claws. Daichi proudly said to Gaku, who stood beside Kiramu, "How is it? Is my Earth Release power enough for promotion?" "If you can be promoted to Special Jonin, that is certainly possible," said Gaku, stroking his beard. Daichi was elated. "Great! It seems I'm one step closer to my dream." Shintaro was digging the soil and asked, "What's your dream?" "My dream is to become a great ninja, like the Sannin or Minato-sama." Daichi detailed his true thoughts. Shintaro replied in a rising tone and asked, "Oh, why not become Hokage?" Daichi quickly waved his hand and said, "I still have some self-awareness, but I think you have a good chance of becoming Hokage." Hearing Daichi's words, Shintaro just smiled and didn't answer. Seeing this, Daichi said, "Anyway, you are very talented. You can definitely do it. If you become Hokage in the future, thank me for my prediction." Before Shintaro could respond, Gaku interrupted Daichi's enthusiasm and said, "Almost done. Everyone else is working hard, and you're still chatting here." Daichi shut his mouth reluctantly. Isamu watched the fun and said, "Weren't you going to become a great ninja like the Sannin? Why are you giving up so quickly?" Daichi stubbornly said, "What do you know? This is called enduring humiliation." Takuto, who was yawning, laughed heartily, making Daichi suddenly feel very embarrassed, and he started working hard with a red face. 82. Night attack. The excavation proceeded smoothly, and after some time, the prototype of the underground tunnel was revealed. The entrance was situated behind a gentle slope, large enough to accommodate 10 people passing side by side. It was less than 10 meters deep, making it difficult for ordinary ninja to detect it unless they were directly above it or specifically using sensory ninjutsu. More than 20 Earth element ninja worked continuously, achieving high efficiency. A lot of rock and earth were broken and cleared constantly. Even so, the several kilometer-long tunnel was still a massive project. They worked from dawn until late at night, gradually approaching the Kumogakure camp on the underground highlands. Outside the camp, several ninja in white vests were patrolling. They were on a night shift, and it had been more than 4 hours since they had woken up in the middle of the night, with about half an hour left until their shift ended. So now was the time they were most drowsy. A ninja stood and began to nap, while several others yawned. At this moment, one of the young ninja suddenly stopped patrolling and asked the older ninja next to him, "Rami, do you feel something?" "Feel something? I feel sleepy." Rami replied with a yawn. "I don't mean that. I mean really." The young ninja insisted. Rami still replied casually, "I'm serious too. I'm really sleepy. It feels like there's movement under my feet." The young ninja ignored Rami's words and continued expressing his feeling. "How could that be? Do you think we're facing a Wagakure ninja?" Rami waved his hand dismissively. He understood the young ninja's concern. He feared the enemy might approach from underground and surprise them. But digging a tunnel out of the sight of Kumogakure ninja would surely be a massive project. If Konoha had moved during the day, it would have been discovered long ago. There was no way Konoha could dig a tunnel overnight, because no matter how many people came, they would use up their energy and chakra by digging the tunnel, which would be like decapitating themselves to Kumogakure. However, the young ninja remained stubborn and ran to the camp to find a censor ninja. Rami shook his head and did not stop him. The young ninja quickly brought back a censor ninja. It was clear the censor ninja had just woken up and was very sleepy. He asked reluctantly, "Where's the movement?" The young ninja pointed to the ground and said, "He said there's movement underground. Please show him so he won't be suspicious anymore." The censor ninja reluctantly sat cross-legged on the ground, formed a seal with his hands, closed his eyes, and began to exert chakra for sensing. The ninja, who initially felt impatient, wanted to hurry up and finish the sensing. But the more he sensed, the more he realized something was wrong, and he mumbled, "It's impossible. It can't be." The censor ninja suddenly opened his eyes, panicked, stood up from the ground, extended his palm, and made a sign of 5. "What's the matter?" Rami sensed something was wrong and asked urgently. The censor ninja stuttered, "There are people down there. There are people down there. 5. 5. What's there to be afraid of about 5 people?" Rami then sighed in relief. 50 people. The censor ninja finally finished speaking. At this moment, with a loud bang, the ground began to shake violently, and then the rocky earth under their feet cracked. Gaton Raika no Jutsu. A dragon of fire burst through the already fragile ground, and a large hole suddenly appeared in the earth. Then a yellow-haired ninja appeared first in front of the Kumogakure patrolling ninja. "Why, yellow flash?" Rami was also frightened and stuttered. Minato threw kunai and cleanly eliminated all the patrolling ninja in front of him. Shintaro followed and launched another fire attack at the gate wall of the Kumogakure camp, instantly blasting the gate into charred residue. Then the Konoha ninja, who had been waiting for a long time, rushed out of the ground and charged toward the camp, showcasing their special abilities. The Earth Element ninja, who had just been responsible for digging the path, stayed in place, resting and guarding the underground tunnel. Gaku and Konoha used their combined skills again, and 2 tornado whirlwinds swept through, lifting several Kumogakure camps into the air and floating in the air with the help of high-speed, rotating winds to attack. Soon, this man-and-dog duo had wiped out nearly 10 Kumogakure ninja. Others also had excellent records. Isamu, skilled with ninja tools, accurately threw several explosive kunai into several Kumogakure ninja camps. Takuto used his mastered fire element and burned several tents. The Kumogakure ninja, whose clothes were on fire, ran out naked but were killed by him with a few moves. Including Shintaro, The casualties caused by the Inuzuka Gakka team alone had already exceeded the casualties caused by Kumogakure's previous night attack on Konoha. After all, the purposes of both sides were different. Konoha this time was purely for revenge, while Kumogakure was just for capturing a traitor. Shintaro's fire element bombarded everywhere, as if at no cost. A large area of the Kumogakure camp instantly turned into scorched earth, rocks collapsed, and the hot stone shot out could cause significant damage. But in terms of the most magnificent moves, it was definitely Minato. He once again used Rasen Senk Ch Rinbuk Sanshiki, constantly moving between kunai, and combined with the flash bombs dropped, all enemies in front of him were killed. Minato's yellow hair blurred into a shadow in the air, and the light emitted by the flash bombs was blinding. After all, there's only a wrong name, never a wrong nickname. As everyone was killing people in the camp, the commander of Kumogakure, AI, the son of the third Raikage, stood up and quickly organized a counterattack. After all, there were only a dozen Konoha ninja who entered the camp, and there were thousands of Kumogakure ninja in the camp. The reason it went so smoothly now was mainly because Kumogakure was caught off guard. Now, Kumogakure gradually organized a counterattack, and soon several Konoha ninja couldn't resist and were hit by lightning element ninjutsu. Their whole bodies were scorched black and severely injured. Seeing this, Minato decisively ordered a retreat. Minato and Shintaro stood in front of everyone to block Kumogakure's counterattack. However, the Kumogakure ninja surrounded from all directions, and it was difficult for these two to withstand all the Kumogakure ninja. Soon a Kumogakure ninja passed through and attacked the retreating Konoha force. Just as everyone in Konoha was in crisis again, a strong figure stood in front of everyone. It was another Jonin, a Kimichi Dodo, who was also Minato's teammate. Dodo took out a green pill and swallowed it in one gulp. The aura on his body increased more than 3 times. Then he turned into a giant 5 or 6 meters tall. Seeing this, Gaku merged with Kuromaru, transforming into a 2-headed dog. Then he used a secret technique to turn into a sharp spinning slash that attacked the enemies surrounding Dodo. This gave the Konoha ninja a chance to escape back into the tunnel. Minato shouted to the rear at this moment. "You two also return and block the way. I'll come from behind." Dodo and Gaku trusted Minato and retreated decisively without hesitation. Minato turned around and said to Shintaro, "Please hold them off a bit longer." Shintaro felt no fear or trepidation about staying behind. That's what I want. 83. Thunder Chakra mode boom with the explosion of the explosive tag. The tunnel entrance was blasted, making it difficult for the pursuing enemies to dig through quickly. The enemies who pursued from underground were unsure of the tunnel's direction, leading them to give up and return to their camp. Minato and Shintaro were surrounded by thousands of Kumogakure ninja. Shintaro checked with 6 eyes. The exact number was 5,623. Including the recent additions, there were a total of 5,782 ninja in this camp. We just need to hold out for a while, and once the main force is safely away, I'll use Hirashin no Jutsu to get you out, Minato said while fighting the Kumogakure ninja. Shintaro calmly replied, "No problem." Ketan, Shuriken no Jutsu. A large number of shuriken were launched, killing several more Kumogakure ninja. For a moment, Shintaro and Minato's killing spree kept the Kumogakure ninja from daring to approach. Lariat! A rough shout was heard. A dark-skinned, muscular man with bright blonde hair rushed towards them, his body covered in visible blue lightning chakra. Minato immediately used Hirashin no Jutsu to teleport. The man jumped into the air, but seemed to stabilize himself as he had anticipated. After locating where Minato reappeared, he continued his charge. Shintaro was truly stunned by this reckless and powerful style. Is this AI? Although he had never seen AI before, he could deduce it from the other's aura. Minato was forced to evade for a moment, but he didn't want to keep dodging like this. He threw a kunai, AI dodged, but Minato instantly appeared next to the kunai, now behind AI. Rasengan, AI's back was hit by the Rasengan, and he was immediately slammed into the ground, creating a large crater. However, AI quickly got up like nothing had happened. "Namikaze Minato, you dare to enter the camp, so don't blame me for being ruthless." AI glared with bright eyes. Minato realized something and quickly threw a kunai toward Shintaro. However, AI intercepted it in midair. AI raised his hand, knocked the kunai out of the air, and charged at Shintaro with astonishing speed. Shintaro remained calm upon seeing this, which puzzled AI. This reminded AI of the first time he fought Minato, as Minato had the same expression. AI didn't have time to think too much, raised his elbow again, and used the terrifying speed brought by his Thunder Chakra mode to turn into a blue blur and attack Shintaro. Shintaro calmly extended his finger in front of him. Infinity. AI's elbow stopped in midair about 10 centimeters in front of Shintaro. AI's face, not particularly pleasant already, was full of doubt. He had never seen such a strange method before. Shintaro didn't give the opponent a chance to think and twisted aside. AI immediately lost his balance and rushed back, crashing into the crowd of Kumobikure ninja. Minato came to Shintaro's side at this moment and said with lingering fear, "Fortunately, you're okay. Was that a Kekkei Jinkai just now?" Indeed, Shintaro didn't intend to hide it anymore. Firstly, if he hid it any longer, he would be treating Minato like a fool. And secondly, Shintaro believed he now had the strength to showcase his limitless technique. Minato smiled and said, "Good. Let's continue." AI had just rushed out and nearly killed a Kumobikure ninja. Fortunately, he pulled his strength back in time and released his Thunder Chakra mode to save the Kumobikure ninja's life. AI stood up and reactivated his Thunder Chakra mode while saying to the surrounding Kumobikure ninja, "All of you step aside. Only I can handle these two." He no longer underestimated Shintaro and saw him as an opponent equal to Minato. Damn it. If only B were here, otherwise. AI was thinking about something when he suddenly felt his body lose balance and was immediately sucked toward Shintaro. Bang, Shintaro punched AI in the stomach, and the combined pull and stopping power of infinity made AI want to vomit from the strange sense of spatial dislocation. Shintaro wrapped infinity around this punch to avoid getting hurt by the Thunder Chakra on AI's body and to create a unique attack effect to confuse the enemy. Bam Bam, while AI couldn't react, Shintaro punched him twice more. However, AI in Thunder Chakra mode was more resilient to attacks than Kakuzu in his earth-hardened state. Kakuzu spat blood after taking 2 punches from him, while AI, besides throwing up the food he ate last night, continued fighting Shintaro like normal. However, AI couldn't harm Shintaro at all, so they both backed off and took a temporary pause. Is that a gravitational pull? A very powerful ability. AI held back the overwhelming feeling and watched warily. Shintaro was contemplating how to break through his opponent's shell. To use Black Flash, he needed to release infinity and let his fist actually touch AI, but that could cause his hand to get hurt again by the Thunder Chakra mode. Moreover, Black Flash couldn't be used just because he wanted to, especially since Shintaro no longer mastered the reverse curse technique. If his hand became useless, it would be a huge waste, and the benefit wouldn't be worth the cost. Rasengan? But Minato had just shown that a normal Rasengan didn't affect AI. Minato thought of a solution at this moment and said, "Let's work together. You pull him, and I'll use Rasengan to break through his defense." Shintaro nodded and decided to give it a try. But as soon as he extended his hand to use blue, AI disappeared from his spot. Instead of rushing at Shintaro, he began moving around him and Minato at high speed. Blue fell into the air and only sucked up a pile of gravel. Shintaro realized that his method of sucking people in and defeating them was only suitable for dealing with ninjas like Kakuzu, but not as effective against agile and armored warriors like AI. Shintaro increased the effect of cursed energy and exerted his full power. Curse technique laps maximum output. Blue. A blue light lit up and the rocky ground in the distance shattered into pieces, condensing into a ball in the air. As Shintaro waved his hand, the ball of gravel moved with the blue light, chasing AI's figure. The ground along the way was completely shattered, and the size of the gravel ball continued to increase. Even after he spun his hand in a full circle, he ultimately failed to catch up with AI's speed. Instead, the rocky ground within 20 meters around him was completely destroyed by him. Shintaro waved his hand and slammed the gravel ball in the air towards AI. AI used his thunder chakra mode to shoulder the falling gravel, then rushed closer and raised his hand to attack Minato. AI temporarily gave up on the idea of breaking through Shintaro's defense and aimed to strike at Minato, but Minato wasn't an ordinary person. Throwing a kunai, he stepped on AI's back, injected the kunai's blade with wind element chakra, and broke through the thunder chakra defense. However, AI reacted instantly, turned around, and waved his hand, forcing Minato away. Thanks to his timely response, AI only suffered a minor wound on his back. Seeing Shintaro about to use blue again, AI immediately left the spot. Shintaro used blue to continue absorbing the ground. Minato also used Hirashin no Jutsu to chase him and join the battle. The three extremely fast men fought together, and the Kumogakure ninja were mesmerized by the sight. The battle continued until the sun slowly rose, with no clear result in sight. 84. The first show of fame, the dawn sunlight shone over the Kumogakure camp. Shintaro, Minato, and AI were still fighting in the open space, surrounded by Kumogakure ninjas. Shintaro and Minato seemed to handle AI with ease, even finding time to attack the surrounding Kumogakure ninjas. AI rushed between them, but couldn't land any hits. However, Minato and Shintaro also couldn't find an effective way to inflict serious damage on AI. There was no point in continuing the fight. Minato moved beside Shintaro, and both decided to retreat. Minato placed his hand on Shintaro's shoulder, and they vanished, reappearing on a distant slope. The tunnel exit had been blocked by the explosion. They then retreated to the Konoha camp. At the Kumogakure camp, AI sighed in relief before suddenly losing his strength and collapsing. AI-sama. The Kumogakure ninjas gathered in panic. AI waved his hand, indicating he was merely exhausted. After all, Minato relied on Hirashin no Jutsu to teleport. Shintaro used blue to pull himself, but AI had to rely on his lightning element to stimulate himself to fight the two at high speed, which naturally placed a great burden on his body. After calming down, AI ordered his men to clean up the aftermath while he silently returned to the camp. AI sat behind his desk. After a long silence, he furiously punched the desk, splitting the large desk in two. Damn it! The Kumogakure ninja, standing guard outside, ran in panic, and AI commanded, "Go and investigate." Who is the white-haired ninja with Namikaze's Minato? Yes, crossing the border of the land of frost, Shintaro began chatting with Minato. Minato-san, what ninjutsu do you think could break AI's lightning chakra? Shintaro asked. Minato first said, "You and Kakashi are in the same class, so you don't need to call me so differently. If you don't mind, just call me sensei." Then he started thinking about the question, and after a while he answered, "That's a secret lightning chakra mode in Kumogakure village. According to attribute restraint, it's natural to use wind element to break it. But AI is so fast in lightning chakra mode, ordinary wind element ninjutsu can't touch him at all. So I want to combine the wind element with Rasengan, then use it with Hirashin no Jutsu. Maybe then I can break it." Shintaro nodded after hearing this. He also believed this was a possible route. By the way, you also have wind element chakra, and your talent is outstanding. Maybe you can help me develop this jutsu. Minato reached out and patted his shoulder for encouragement. Shintaro replied casually, but besides this method, he was also thinking of another way. Maybe blue and Rasengan could be combined. Minato asked again this time. By the way, when did your Kekiai, Genkai awaken? Shintaro immediately thought of an answer. After the Chunin exam. This answer was, of course, incorrect. If Minato referred to the 6 eyes, he was born with them. If he meant the Limitless technique, Shintaro awakened it when he was still a genin. After giving the general answer of the Chunin exam, he didn't want Minato to know that he had been hiding it since he was young, making it seem too crafty. Minato nodded when he heard this and said, "So, you are a double Kekiai Genkai ninja. This is uncommon in Konoha. Truly amazing." Shintaro exchanged a few polite words, and they didn't discuss the matter further. "You've achieved remarkable feats this time. I will write to Hokage-sama and recommend you for a promotion." Minato continued to win Shintaro's favor, clearly linked to the fact that he had just witnessed his true strength. Don't blame Hokage-sama for this. Sometimes he can't help it. Minato was referring to Shintaro's rejection of the promotion to Jonin. Shintaro waved his hand and said, "It's fine." Minato thought to himself and said, "Actually, I also feel there are many things in Konoha that need to change now. Just wait a little longer. Wait until..." He didn't continue. But even so, it showed that Minato regarded Shintaro as his own. Shintaro felt a bit touched deep inside and said, "I believe Minato-sensei can change Konoha." A gentle smile appeared on Minato's kind face, and his eyes looked ahead firmly. Both moved quickly and soon returned to the camp. As soon as Minato returned to the camp, he rushed to the tent where Orochimaru was recovering, but Shintaro was stopped by a group of people. They were some members of Inuzuka Gaku's team and Kurumuru. "Are you okay?" Gaku asked with concern. Shintaro smiled and spread his arms without saying anything. Daichi actually stepped forward and walked carefully, looking up and down at Shintaro. "It's fine." He seemed surprised. Isamu could only sigh. Being able to fight in the Kumogakure camp until dawn and still be uninjured is as excessive as Minato-sama. Takuto's eyes widened, and he looked much more energetic. Kurumuru ran around Shintaro twice, wagging his tail before returning to Gaku. Shintaro said, "Aren't you happy to see me okay?" "Of course, I'm happy." Daichi smiled brightly. "I'm still waiting for you to become Hokage in the future." Shintaro laughed and said, "Then you'll have to keep waiting." Everyone laughed heartily, and Daichi's face turned red again. "Don't laugh." Unfortunately, Daichi never managed to keep the Inuzuka Gaku team in check. So, a few people laughed and dispersed. Soon, the news of a nighttime assault on the Kumogakure ninja camp led by Minato and Shintaro spread in the Konoha camp into the Konoha village, along with the ninjas reporting the battle situation. People started saying that Shintaro would become the second Yellow Flash, and they began thinking of nicknames for Shintaro, like White Flash, White Death, etc. In short, they imitated the naming style of Yellow Flash. Though it sounded a bit amusing, it also indicated that Shintaro had begun to show his prestige. In Konoha, Shintaro's acquaintances also heard about his reputation on the battlefield. Everyone had different reactions after learning this. Kakashi initially received the mission in the mission collection area, but learned about it after hearing people discussing it. Then he decisively chose to join the team on an S-rank mission. "Shintaro is ahead. I can't lag behind anymore." Guy increased his training volume, not entirely for Shintaro, but mainly because during the war, all daily missions fell on them, the ninjas staying in the village, leaving them less time to train. After Asuma got the news, he seemed to get an idea and directly headed to the Hokage building. Kurenai was initially happy because Shintaro had made a contribution, but soon became worried for him. Fighting inside the Kumogakure camp, Shintaro must be injured. "Father, do you think I can go to the border to look for him?" Shinku beside her sighed, lamenting that women couldn't endure, and said, "You can't go, but you can write a letter." "Yes, write a letter." Kurenai's eyes lit up, full of excitement, and then a hint of shyness appeared. The girl began to think wildly in her heart. After all, a wife writing to her husband far away on the battlefield is a theme often seen in drama creations. She seemed to include herself in it. In the Kumogakure ninja camp, there was another explosion, and the new table that had just been replaced was broken by AI's palm. "A Chunin. Are you telling me we were fooled by a Chunin?" AI got angry again at his subordinates. There's also Namake's Minato. His subordinate said obediently. "Shut up," AI said angrily. He got dizzy when he heard the name Namake's Minato, and now there was another name, Uchiha Shintaro. 85. Kumogakure's plan the day after Kumogakure's camp was attacked. The Kumogakure ninja launched an unprecedented assault, as if they intended to secure their victory in one battle and defeat Konoha in a single move. A large force came from the land of frost. Such a movement couldn't be hidden from the patrolling ninjas. The Konoha ninja team, tasked with patrolling and guarding, immediately retreated upon seeing this and returned to camp to report the military situation. The Kumogakure ninja force is approaching. People couldn't help but panic. At this moment, Orochimaru and Minato emerged from the camp, and everyone in Konoha looked to them as if seeking reassurance. Orochimaru turned to Minato and asked, "Are you sure about the information regarding the Kumogakure ninja camp?" Minato nodded and said, "Of course, Shintaro and I can guarantee this. The Kumogakure ninja camp can clearly accommodate over 10,000 people, but there are only more than 5,000 inside. That's strange." Orochimaru left the message and quickly began to direct the battlefield. No matter what, block this wave of attacks first. The main force will hold the original formation. Minato, the mobile force, and the front troops are responsible for attacking from behind. Orochimaru led the main force to the position, while Minato began to retreat in a classic manner. The fighting styles of the two were also very different. Orochimaru bowed in front of the large force and spewed countless long snakes. In a certain sense, the countless snakes here were not an exaggeration. These snakes gathered to form a sea that stretched as far as the eye could see. In front of the overwhelming number of snakes, defense and escape were meaningless. A group of unfortunate Kumogakure ninjas who rushed forward were quickly overwhelmed by the snakes, entangled, bitten, and devoured. Whoosh AI, wrapped in lightning chakra, rushed towards the snake group. The snake's fangs had no effect on AI, whose body was filled with lightning. Along with the lightning, a large number of venomous snakes were thrown away, and countless broken snake bodies flew in the air. AI broke through the snakes and attacked Orochimaru. Lightning straight. He opened his mouth and uttered 2 words, then was hit by a gust of wind and flew backward. Fton, Tappa, although it was only a level C ninjutsu, it still worked well in Orochimaru's hands. A strong wind immediately hit him, making AI unable to dodge. However, although the range was far, the damage was not ideal. AI was just blown back, without any scars on his body. After all, this was only a level C ninjutsu, and the upper limit of its power was very limited. However, Orochimaru did not intend to kill AI in this formation. His idea was just to hold him back and let the main force defend with all its might. It was Minato and his troops who broke the stalemate on the battlefield. A force of nearly 1,000 men fought from the forest on one side, directly piercing the waist and belly of the Kumogakure ninja force, aiming to cut them in two. The 3 groups of troops fought together, and the scene was very lively. Shintaro was in Inuzuka Gaku's team and began to activate his technique. Curse technique lapse, blue. After a burst of blue light, several Kumogakure ninjas were sucked into the center of the blue light, sticking together and unable to move. Gaku reacted immediately. Ska, whoosh, the Kumogakure ninjas caught in the high-speed rotation died miserably. Good, this technique is very powerful, Gaku exclaimed in admiration. Before Shintaro and Gaku could lower their guard, Daichi's shout drew their attention. A Kumogakure ninja broke through the defense and was about to rush towards Daichi. Shintaro raised his hand and sucked Daichi, saving his life. Isamu and Takuto rushed forward and surrounded and killed the Kumogakure ninja. Daichi was sucked into Shintaro's arms, showing his big teeth and smiling. Thanks. Shintaro threw Daichi to Gaku with a disgusted expression. Your breath stinks. Gaku caught him and then let go. Indeed. Daichi patted his butt and cried out in pain. Isamu approached Gaku and said, as an earth element ninja, you shouldn't rush too far forward. Their lightning element can greatly restrain you. You should learn from Takuto in this regard. Isamu's tone was full of fear and worry. He was nearly 40 years old, but had no heirs. Learn from Takuto? Forget it. It takes years and months to become a ninja like Sannin. The stupid Daichi didn't understand the other's good intentions, so he stood up and rubbed his butt. As the captain, Gaku regrouped the team and immediately launched another attack. With Shintaro added, Inuzuka Gaku's team became the most prominent in the entire front and even the mobile force. The entire team was like a sharp knife inserted into the cloud ninja formation. Curse technique lapse, Kadotan, Dosekade Suetan, Susha, Katon, Carry Endin. Shintaro first used blue to suck all the Kumogakure ninjas around. Then Gaku and Kurumuru fell from the sky, creating a large crater where the Kumogakure ninjas were. Then Daichi unleashed a lot of scattered stone projectile attacks. Isamu spewed a large amount of water impact, and Takuto spewed high-speed flames to attack downward. The cooperation of the 5 people became more and more proficient, and one wave of cooperation directly took the lives of 10 Kumogakure ninjas. From small to large, it showed a very fierce counterattack by Konoha. Under Orochimaru's leadership, the main frontal battlefield held firmly against Kumogakure's attack, while Minato's troops successfully cut through the Kumogakure ninja force and successfully forced the Kumogakure frontline ninjas to break through and evacuate. In the end, the battle continued until the afternoon, and the Kumogakure ninjas managed to evacuate after paying the heavy price of more than 900 casualties. Victory for Konoha. Everyone couldn't help but cheer. Compared to the Kumogakure ninjas, Konoha's casualties were less than 500, so it was not an exaggeration to say that this battle was a great victory. The atmosphere in Inuzuka Gaku's team finally relaxed. Phew, it's finally over. Daichi looked exhausted, but couldn't hide his excitement. Yes, it's over. Isamu also sighed in relief. Takuto spoke with his actions, directly lying on the ground. Shintaro looked at the ruined battlefield, lost in thought. The ninja war changed the landscape of the country. Ninjutsu activated by the 5 chakra attributes of water, fire, wind, thunder, and earth turned the country into ruins. Gaku approached Shintaro and asked, "What? Are you worried?" Shintaro shook his head and said, "No, I was just thinking about Kumogakure's plan." "What plan?" Gaku didn't understand. Shintaro explained, Kumogakure's initial strategy was clearly very wise, but now it suddenly became radical, and it seems they deliberately wanted to attract our attention. I observed their camp. It can clearly accommodate 10,000 people, but there are only more than 5,000 inside. So, they must be making a big move in the near future. Gaku thought seriously. Shintaro, let's go to the commander's camp together. Minato waved and spoke softly. 86. Investigation Mission Minato and Shintaro arrived at the training camp where Orochimaru was located. The 3 of them gathered again around table. Orochimaru got straight to the point. There is now a high likelihood that Kumogakure will have the strength to break through our defensive line and attack. Our defensive line protects the strategic arteries between the land of rivers and the land of frost, completely blocking Kumogakure from passing through the land of rivers to attack the mainland of the land of fire. Therefore, the Kumogakure ninjas might want to use shock troops to break the stalemate. Minato added, "Our military strength is at a disadvantage, so our response strategy can only be passive. The only troops we can mobilize in the camp now are my 1,000 soldiers, but now they're only just over 900 due to casualties. That's why we can't divide our forces further. The enemy's shock troops are conservatively estimated to number 4,000. Our troops must ensure that they act together to maintain combat effectiveness." Shintaro immediately understood their point. "You mean the troops will remain stationary, send some teams to investigate the enemy's whereabouts, and then provide support?" Minato's eyes showed appreciation, but Orochimaru wasn't surprised at all. Shintaro had been his assistant for some time. Orochimaru pointed to the sand table and said, "Minato and I have discussed that Kumogakure may have 3 possible directions for their attack. First, landing on the coast of the land of rivers, and then attacking the fragile border defense line of the land of rivers. Second, still landing from the land of rivers, but turning and entering the land of frost to encircle us with the main force of the Kumogakure ninjas. Third, bypassing our defense line from the southeast by sea landing and attacking an undefended area, or even directly assaulting the eastern coast of the Land of Fire. We must guard these three directions, so I'm assigning this mission to Minato. He raised his hand to signal Minato to present his thoughts. Due to the limited troops, I plan to send only 5 teams to spread out for investigation. There are many undefended areas in the Land of Rivers, so 3 teams will be sent there, 1 team to the eastern Land of Fire, and the last to the Land of Frost. The last team has the most challenging mission because the enemy is more likely to land in the Land of Frost, and you also have to determine their attack direction. Therefore, I decided to assign this mission to you and Inuzuka Gaku's team. Shintaro agreed. No problem. Minato warned again. We must avoid combat and ensure safety. If we find enemy traces, we must immediately inform the defense line and headquarters. Understood. Shintaro replied. With his current strength, he was very confident in completing this mission. Orochimaru nodded in satisfaction and said, "Without further delay, you will set off immediately." Shintaro was about to turn and leave when Minato stopped him and said, "Be sure to pay attention to safety. Also, the person in charge of the defense line is Hyuga Hayashi, the leader of the Uchiha Clan. You can ask him to support your team with some personnel. The Uchiha Clan's Byakugan is very effective in investigation missions." Shintaro thought for a moment and then replied, "All right, I will go to the defense line first." He then left the training camp and went to Inuzuka Gaku's team to inform the 4 of them about the mission. The 4 had different reactions. Gaku calmly accepted the mission. As a senior Konoha Jonin, he had seen many missions of this level. Although this mission was difficult, it was essentially an investigation mission. As a ninja of the Inuzuka clan, he was not only skilled in ninja techniques like physical attacks with animals, but also had a keen sense of smell. Therefore, investigation missions were often carried out. Daichi remained the enthusiastic young man who only cared about military achievements regardless of the danger. He hoped, after this mission is successful, I can always be promoted to Special Jonin. Shintaro, you will definitely be promoted then. You might be promoted to Jonin in no time. Isamu frowned and said, "It's such a dangerous mission to investigate the presence of 4,000 enemy soldiers." Takuto sighed and said, "There are more than 4,000 of them." Daichi tiptoed and patted them both, then confidently said, "Don't worry, I will protect you." Takuto sneered and said, "I don't know who was just saved by the 2 of us." Isamu also stated, "You better protect yourself first." Daichi crossed his arms and remained silent to express his dissatisfaction. At this moment, Gaku stood up and took control of the situation, saying, "Enough, stop arguing, pack your things quickly, and we will leave in 5 minutes." Everyone returned to the camp, put on all their gear, and took supplies for 3 days. They set off at dusk and headed straight to the defense line. Around 11 o'clock at night, they arrived at the defense line. After reporting their identities to the patrol guards, Shintaro and the group met Hyuga Hayashi. Hayashi wore a tight black combat uniform with a green Jonin vest over it. Although he had a headscarf to protect his forehead, Shintaro knew the other party was a member of the Uchiha Clan. "You want reinforcements from the Uchiha Clan?" Since Shintaro and the group had already explained their intentions during the briefing, Hayashi got straight to the point. "Correct. Shintaro, as the person in charge of this mission, answered the question." After getting Shintaro's confirmation, Hayashi signaled to the people outside the camp to come in. The man was dressed similarly to Hayashi and looked very much like him. However, Shintaro's keen eyes could clearly see that the man had a curse mark on his head, covered by a headscarf. "This is my brother, Hyuga Hizashi. His strength is on par with mine. I'm sure he can assist you," Hayashi introduced. Hizashi greeted Shintaro and the group politely. Shintaro didn't hesitate, and after receiving the reinforcements, he led them away from the defense line. Time was short, and the mission was heavy, so there was no room for unnecessary delay. Hizashi was relatively quiet all the way, but also very cooperative, investigating the Land of Rivers area with Shintaro and Inuzuka Gaku's team. Several people investigated from the defense line to the north, and then to the east of the Hot Water Nation's defense line. Shintaro was worried that Kumogakure's troops would approach. Fortunately, no traces of Kumogakure ninjas were found, and several people sighed in relief. It seems that the Kumogakure ninjas haven't gone deep into the land of rivers, Hizashi said seriously, with veins bulging around his eyes, looking somewhat fierce. He then closed his eyes. Shintaro agreed from the side and sighed inwardly. In terms of field of vision alone, the Byakugan is superior. Gaku stood up and said, "Even so, we must not be careless. The enemy hasn't penetrated deeper, meaning we will penetrate deeper. We must be more cautious from now on." 87. Enemies across the sea, what should we do now? Daichi looked at Gaku, bewildered. Gaku glanced at Shintaro, who turned and said, "Let's conduct a thorough search of the land of forest first. I'm concerned they might be hiding in a secluded spot." Hizashi then said, "Don't worry. No matter how hidden the place is, it can't escape the sight of the Byakugan." Shintaro nodded, seeing Hizashi's confident gaze. "All right, then it's up to you." They searched through the forests in the southern part of the land of forest. After searching all night, they confirmed that the Kumogakure ninjas were not hiding there. Further north, there are hills and flat plains. The Kumogakure ninjas wouldn't hide there, would they? Gaku was slightly confused. Having frequently traveled abroad for missions, he was quite familiar with the terrain of the land of forest. Maybe the enemy's speed isn't as fast as we expected. Hizashi guessed. Shintaro thought for a moment and said, "Whatever the case, the remaining areas need to be carefully inspected." Hizashi didn't object and rubbed his eyes silently. Using the Byakugan all night was quite exhausting. Shintaro noticed Hizashi's predicament and thoughtfully said, "Take a rest first. I can also sense ninjutsu. Let me handle it from here." Hizashi agreed. Shintaro then used his 6 eyes to investigate. Although he couldn't see objects 10 kilometers away as clearly as in front of him like the Byakugan, he could still clearly detect disturbances within several hundred meters. Moreover, the terrain in the northern part of the land of forest had wide-open views, not requiring overly meticulous inspection. The group busied themselves, and after several searches, they confirmed there was indeed no trace of Kumogakure ninja invasions in the land of forest. It seems the direction of the Kumogakure ninja attack is not here. Gaku sighed in relief. Shintaro nodded slightly and said, "But there's still the coastline we haven't checked." By morning, they stood on a hilltop, able to see the deep blue color in the north from afar. Everyone felt that the Kumogakure ninja would not attack the land of forest. The reason was simple. Time was the most precious thing on the battlefield. The Kumogakure ninja forces set out at the latest the day Konoha attacked the camp at night. It had been 3 days since then, and they would have arrived long ago if they intended to attack. The sea. I've never seen it in my life. Daichi looked into the distance, excited. Isamu adopted an elder's demeanor and said, "You have a long life ahead of you. There will be many opportunities in the future." Takuto leaned his head with one hand, covered his mouth with the other, and yawned. It would be so nice to sleep on the beach with the sea breeze. Gaku shook his head helplessly but didn't stop their banter. He knew his team had gone through an intense night of searching and needed to relax. Hizashi obediently said, "I'll accompany you to search the last beach and then leave." Shintaro nodded in greeting and said, "Thank you all for your hard work." Initially, he thought they would definitely face enemies in the land of forest this time. After all, by invading the land of forest, Kumogakure could attack the defense line on the border between the land of forest and the land of fire and penetrate directly into the heartland of the land of fire. When Kumogakure retreated, they could surround Konoha's northeastern defense headquarters with Kumogakure's main forces and join forces. Logically, it was the perfect choice. However, the current situation seemed to indicate otherwise. Kumogakure might have other considerations. So Shintaro began to ponder if invading another place had advantages surpassing those of invading the land of forest. He still couldn't figure it out. Attacking the southeastern part of the land of rivers or directly attacking the land of fire's coastline. Although it seemed to avoid the 2 Konoha forces stationed in the northeast, it also put themselves in danger. The northeastern forces led by Orochimaru didn't guard the defense line, but it didn't mean there was no one guarding it. Another of Konoha's Sannin, Jiraiya, was stationed in the east and southeast of the Land of Fire, responsible for guarding against Kirigakure. The western part of the Land of Fire was guarded by Tsunade, the only medical ninja among the Sannin, responsible for countering Sunagakure, which excelled in using poisons. If the Kumogakure ninjas attacked in that direction, they would definitely be intercepted by the forces led by Jiraiya. Moreover, that direction was far from Kumogakure's main forces. Instead, the Kumogakure ninja force would become a single unit, easily surrounded and suppressed by Konoha. However, no matter what, Shintaro had completed his mission. As for the specific movements of the Kumogakure ninja forces, it was better left to other investigative teams to find out. Perhaps other teams had already encountered the Kumogakure ninja forces, Shintaro thought, as he and the investigative team headed to the beach. The group arrived at the beach in the Land of Forest. The morning sunlight softly illuminated the sea's surface, and the moist, cool sea breeze blew against their faces. Daichi opened his arms to welcome the sea breeze. Except for his not-so-handsome appearance and monkey-like yell, the scene was quite picturesque. Isamu relaxed and looked at Daichi's back with a gentle expression. This kid, Takuto, shivered slightly. Sure, it's still no good. The weather's a bit cold, so I won't be able to sleep soundly. Gakka stepped out and said, "Since the mission is complete, I allow you to relax a bit. Long live the captain." Yeah. Daichi and Takuto cheered, and Isamu completely relaxed, enjoying the sea breeze like Daichi. Hizashi's personality clearly didn't match the current relaxed and comfortable atmosphere. Hizashi said to Shintaro, "Now that we've confirmed no trace of Kumogakure ninja invasions on the beach, I'll head back." Gakko advised, "No need to rush." Shintaro was silent for a moment, then said in a very serious tone, "Hizashi, use your Byakugan to look across the sea." The sudden words made everyone's relaxed mood feel like falling into an icy cave. Hizashi immediately formed a seal and activated his Byakugan. Veins bulged around his eyes as he stared straight out to sea. His expression suddenly changed. Across the sea, there are enemies. In the sea 5 kilometers from the beach in the northern part of the Land of Forest, a large fleet of dozens of transport ships was sailing on the sea. On the deck of the leading transport ship, a dark-skinned Kumogakure ninja wearing a half-sleeved white vest approached the bow. He held onto the railing and shouted to the sea below, "B-sama, we're almost there. You can land in 10 minutes." In front of the fleet, a huge monster appeared from the sea. The upper body of the monster looked like a bull, with 2 horns on its head, but the lower body had 8 giant octopus tentacles, splashing out of the water from time to time. "The sun is up, but we haven't arrived yet. Bakiyaro Kaniyaro. If Aniki finds out, there will be punishment, yo-yo." The giant monster gradually transformed into the form of a young man, or rather, merged into the young man's body. This monster was Hachibi, the bijou of Kumogakure, and the young man was Killer B, Hachibi's Jinchuriki. Killer B rapped with a strange accent. His dark skin showed beneath his half-sleeved white vest, revealing an iron tattoo on his right arm. "Gyuki, it's all your fault for wanting to play in the sea, causing us to be delayed by a whole day. Bakiyaro Kaniyaro." In his spiritual world, Hachibi's voice was heard. "It's not easy going to the sea. Wait, B, there's an enemy on the beach." Killer B looked into the distance and spotted several tiny black dots. "When we meet the enemy, we unite. My killing intent is my courage." How positive it is. "I'm great, yeah." He made a 6+1 gesture, looking somewhat drunk. After that, he left his fleet and headed towards the beach. 88. Jinchuriki of the Hachibi. That's a fleet of over 4,000 people. Wait a minute, someone's coming from the other side. They're very powerful. I fear it's the Jinchuriki of the Hachibi. Hizashi quickly reported the situation, looking panicked. Shintaro gave instructions with a serious expression on his face. "Go and report the situation. You must relay the news of Kumogakure's attack, so they can mobilize forces to counter it. What about you?" Gakka looked at him anxiously. Shintaro said calmly, "Don't worry, I'm very strong." Gakka said nothing more and immediately turned and ran back with several others. Daichi and the others looked back at Shintaro as they ran. Shintaro felt Daichi's and the others' gaze, so he turned around and waved his hand, signaling them to run quickly. At that moment, Daichi and the others focused on escaping. At sea, Killer Bee, who was running, saw several people preparing to escape. He spoke again. The hateful enemy is actually trying to escape, Bakayaro Kanayaro. If the information leaks, I'll get scolded again. Killer Bee transformed his lower body into the bijou and used the octopus tentacles to swim at high speed in the sea, quickly approaching the shore. Upon reaching the shore, Killer Bee retracted his tentacles, looked at Shintaro blocking the beach, and shouted loudly, "Bakayaro Kanayaro, move aside quickly, or I'll take action and kill you." Without saying a word, Shintaro opened his Mangekyo Sharingan. Megan, Jibaku Satsu. His only goal was to buy time, so he immediately chose Jinjutsu. However, the Jinjutsu seemed ineffective on the enemy. After being stunned for a moment, Killer Bee awakened. "I'm the Jinchuriki of the Hachibi, Killer Bee, and I'm the best at rapping. If you want to compete with me, you white-haired Uchiha kid, you're still a million miles behind. Bakayaro Kanayaro." Killer Bee raised his hand and spoke confidently. Curse technique lapse, blue. Without saying a word, Shintaro pulled Killer Bee in front of him with blue and punched him. Killer Bee was caught off guard and one of his ribs broke. However, he reacted quickly and endured the pain. He pulled out two short, sharp blades from his back and thrust them at Shintaro's neck. Quickly transform into Bijou. B. This kid is strange. Killer Bee activated the Bijou transformation without hesitation, and his body was immediately covered with a hot, dark red Bijou chakra. Shintaro, who had just failed the Black Flash attempt, was about to try again, but was hit by the suddenly attacking Killer Bee. Killer Bee was actually wrapped in white bones, and he attacked Shintaro with high speed and strength. Shintaro was directly blown away, but quickly absorbed himself with blue and didn't fly too far. A dark chakra ball condensed from Killer Bee's mouth. This chakra ball condensed immense power. It was a unique skill that only Bijou could use. Shintaro didn't dare to ignore it and prepared to launch Infinity. However, when the Baijidama flew out, it didn't attack Shintaro, but instead targeted the escaping Inuzuka Gakka team behind. Shintaro immediately turned around, stretched out his hand, and threw blue, once pulling the Baijidama from the air. Boom, the Baijidama exploded instantly, creating a huge crater on the ground behind the beach. Thick smoke billowed from the hole, and the heavily scorched surface showed the terrifying power of the Baijidama. Shintaro didn't have time to be shocked by the Baijidama's power, as Killer Bee had already started to transform further into a full Bijou. As a perfect Jinchuriki, Killer Bee could transform into the Hachibi and maintain his consciousness. The powerful chakra and terrifying power of the Bijou were perfectly displayed. Killer Bee transformed into the Hachibi. He used his tentacles, which could destroy a small hill with a single strike. Shintaro wanted to use blue to imprison the Hachibi tentacles, but these tentacles were too large, and he could only control 4 of them. The other 4 tentacles quickly wrapped around him, and Shintaro fought off 3 tentacles with his fists, but was captured by the 4th. Although he survived and was safe thanks to Infinity, it was difficult to break free in a short time. The Hachibi took this opportunity to condense chakra in its mouth, forming a giant Baijidama. If the previous Baijidama was the size of a basketball, then the current Baijidama was much taller than a human. The Baijidama was directly shot at the distant Inuzuka Gakka team. Shintaro used blue with all his might, but failed to stop this Baijidama. The Baijidama paused slightly due to blue, but as soon as the Hachibi raised its tentacle and slammed it to the ground, Shintaro lost control of blue, allowing the Baijidama to continue shooting. Boom, the fiery light of the explosion reflected in Shintaro's eyes, and Magatama were added to his pair of Sharingan. Moreover, this pair of 3 Magatama Sharingan seemed a bit strange. The original blood-red color around the eyes was replaced by some clumps of blue, as if blue ink had soaked into the blood. However, he no longer had time to think about the strangeness in his eyes. Negative emotions like self-blame, regret, and anger not only caused his Sharingan to evolve again, but also finally merged into cursed energy, making his cursed energy suddenly reach a higher level. As a result, Shintaro regained most of the power he mastered in his previous life, including reverse curse technique. Curse technique reversal, red. Shintaro extended 2 fingers to make a gun gesture, then condensed dark red light at his fingertips. The repulsive force, accompanied by red light, condensed into a ball and hit the Hachibi tentacle. Boom, a huge bloody hole suddenly appeared in the Hachibi tentacle, allowing Shintaro to escape. The infinity wrapped around his body pushed the air, allowing Shintaro to stand in thin air. He looked at the place where the Baijidama had exploded and realized that the Inuzuka Gaku team was almost entirely wiped out. At the explosion site, the nearby hills were flattened. The Inuzuka Gaku team wasn't at the center of the explosion, perhaps because Blue had just altered the Baijidama's trajectory. However, even so, the Baijidama remained an attractive technique for ordinary ninjas. Daichi used Earth-style ninjutsu to surround several people, trying to protect everyone, but he himself was thrown to the ground, and Isamu shielded him with his body. Soon after the explosion, the earth wall made by Daichi collapsed immediately. As a result of the explosion, Daichi and Isamu were buried here. Nearby, Konoha desperately dug to dig out the safe air raid shelter, but time was running out. Gaku pushed Koromaru into the half-dug air raid shelter and blocked the hole with his body. Takudo came to Gaku and used his body to shield the captain. In the distance, Hizashi, who acted separately from everyone, also felt the crisis. He immediately turned his body and released chakra all over his body, forming a spinning chakra shield shaped like a half-ball. In the end, the explosion subsided. Among the few people, only Hizashi was slightly injured, but he was also shocked by the explosion and vomited blood. Daichi, Isamu, and Takudo died on the spot. Gaku was still alive, but losing so much blood that he was near death. Koromaru carried Gaku and ran, while Hizashi continued running towards the border. If the information wasn't conveyed, everyone's sacrifice would be in vain. Gaku was on Koromaru's back. He was unconscious but still spirited. He dipped his finger in blood and wrote on Koromaru's back, "Field, enemy, landing." He pushed Koromaru away and let himself fall to the ground. Koromaru immediately stopped and rubbed his head against Gaku's chin, trying to pick him up again. Gaku used his last strength to scold. "Run. Take the information back." Koromaru's eyes filled with tears, and he barked twice as a final farewell, then put Gaku down and ran at full speed. All this was seen by Shintaro's Sharingan and 6 eyes simultaneously. Infinite anger still lingered in his mind, but he didn't choose to explode, instead controlling it, because in this way, these emotions could be converted into cursed energy for his use. Shintaro turned to look at the Hachibi. "I will kill you." His tone was calm, as if he were conducting some kind of death experiment. 89. Monster the red blood and icy blue 3-tomo Sharingan eyes of Shintaro shone, and the total amount of cursed energy in his body once again reached a new level. The reason he had difficulty dealing with Hachibi before was due to the lack of large-scale movements. Ordinary ninjutsu had no effect on a bijou like Hachibi, and while Gentle Fist was very effective against ordinary enemies, it still had little impact on Hachibi. Now that Shintaro had mastered the reverse curse technique, he wanted to show Hachibi who the real monster was. He once again raised his hand and gestured, aiming at the big bull head of Hachibi. Hachibi immediately raised his tentacles to cover his head for defense. Shintaro struck the tentacles and forcibly pushed the giant Hachibi 20 meters back into the sea. Hachibi used his 8 tentacles to block the attack. But when Hachibi reached the sea, this was his home ground. Hachibi submerged beneath the sea, but he could not hide from Shintaro's eyes. Shintaro continued using red to bombard the sea surface, but after being obstructed by seawater, the power hitting Hachibi was much smaller. After all, Hachibi's body was currently controlled by Killer Bee, giving it a very high combat IQ. Shintaro sneered, then raised his hand as blue light condensed in his palm, and then the sea parted. Both blue sucked water from both sides. Hachibi was about to dive deeper for shelter, but was sucked in by the other blue. Shintaro's current operation could already use multiple blue simultaneously. Hachibi relied on his physical strength to fight. One wanted to dive, and the other wanted to pull him out. Moo! Hachibi let out an ear-piercing roar, bursting with all his strength, and forcibly separated himself from blue. Hachibi dived deep into the sea, causing huge waves to crash onto the shore, splashing water in all directions. The roar of the waves mixed with the crashing beach like a massive tidal wave. Under the deep sea, a dark Baijidama slowly condensed, and the terrifying and intimidating power it contained spread through the seawater. The Baijidama broke through the seawater and attacked Shintaro, who was standing in the air. Since Shintaro's fight with Killer Bee, he had never been able to lift infinity. Therefore, Shintaro was not afraid of Baijidama at all, and he directly dove down, opening his hands to catch the Baijidama. The infinity wrapped around his hands blocked the Baijidama attack, and the large Baijidama could no longer advance. At the same time, Shintaro moved downward in the air and quickly pushed the Baijidama back down. Hachibi's eyes showed a horrified expression, and he immediately spat out a thick ink cannon in an attempt to blow up the Baijidama. However, Shintaro reversed the trajectory of the ink cannon with another shot, causing it to shoot into the sky. Shintaro brought the Baijidama to Hachibi. Boom! The Baijidama exploded instantly, directly vaporizing the seawater to create a huge hole, triggering waves far bigger than before. Even the Kumogakure fleet, which had not yet approached the shore, was greatly affected. The transport ships shook violently under the impact of the massive waves and almost capsized. Killer Bee-sama has released his 8 tails. The fleet has stopped moving to avoid accidental damage. The Kumogakure fleet stopped a few kilometers offshore to witness the massive battle between Shintaro and Hachibi. This was a fight between monsters, and they could not interfere. The explosion subsided, and seawater flowed back to fill the void. Hachibi's flesh was already covered with scars, indicating that even he could not fully withstand the power of the Baijidama. However, Shintaro remained unscathed, at least on the surface. Continuously activating infinity and using blue, it repeatedly put a heavy burden on his brain. However, Shintaro quickly used the reverse curse technique to heal the brain's overload and fatigue, and the 6 eyes were enough to meet the cursed energy consumption needed. In this way, Shintaro could devote himself to the battle without worrying about his own condition. His body, protected by infinity, pushed the seawater aside and dived deep to the seabed. Shintaro approached Hachibi and raised his fist to strike. The punch quickly pushed the seawater to form a cavity, which then exploded with great force. BM Hachibi's head was hit hard and had no choice but to tilt downward. However, before Hachibi could react, Shintaro struck again. The 2 consecutive punches left Hachibi and Killer Bee's head spinning. Hachibi hurriedly waved his tentacles to counterattack, trying to capture Shintaro again. However, Shintaro remained alert, quickly dodging the 8 tails, weaving between the octopus's tentacles, and occasionally using red to launch counterattacks. Hachibi struggled to retract his tentacles, wrapping his body, and then began to spin at high speed. Hachibi's massive body and the enormous twisting force generated by the high-speed rotation immediately caused most of the surrounding seawater to start spinning, soon forming a huge vortex. The whirlpool swept everything around it, including sand and fish in the sea. It seemed even Shintaro was not immune. Shintaro was sucked in by the great suction formed by the vortex and was forced to start spinning. But he quickly found a way to break it. He used all the cursed energy in his body to activate blue with unprecedented power, allowing him to maintain suction opposite to Hachibi. The powerful forces from both sides collided, and 2 opposing vortices immediately appeared on the sea surface. The two opposing forces once again caused massive waves in the sea. In other words, since their battle moved to the sea, the giant waves never stopped. This extraordinary confrontation did not last long, as one vortex slowly devoured the other. The winner was Shintaro. Blue forced Hachibi to stop spinning and let him spin along with its own suction. Then Shintaro raised his hand and flew upward at the same time. He surfaced first and actually pulled Hachibi out of the water as well. Shintaro swung hard and threw Hachibi's giant body into the air, then aimed at Hachibi in the air with 2 fingers. Curse technique reversal maximum output. Red. Shintaro fired red 6 times in a row, each one stronger than the last. Every time Hachibi tried to land, he was bounced back into the air. Shintaro's method was ruthless, and his eyes couldn't help but show a mad expression. In the spiritual world, both Hachibi and Killer Bee were shocked. Madman? He's truly a madman. Hachibi sighed while enduring the pain in his body. In this situation, Killer Bee no longer wanted to sing and quickly asked, "Gyuki, what should we do now?" Hachibi replied, "I don't believe he has more chakra than I do. Protect yourself and let him fight." So Hachibi used his tentacles to roll himself into a big ball and was lifted high into the sky by the last Baijidama and then smashed into the sea again. Shintaro didn't give Hachibi time to breathe, sucking him in, with Blue raising his hand and punching again. Then an odd scene appeared in the sea. A white-haired boy flew in the air, chasing an 8-tailed giant wrapped in a ball and beating him mercilessly. It was clear that Hachibi was the stronger-looking monster, but he was beaten until he lost patience. The Kumogakure fleet, watching from afar, was terrified. This person's battle was even more frightening than when Hachibi went on a rampage. 90. The white-haired demon eyes, Shintaro, and Hachibi fought deeper into the sea. The Kumogakure fleet, initially watching from afar, gradually realized something was wrong. "Retreat quickly!" Finally, a Kumogakure Jnin stepped forward to direct the fleet to withdraw. The two were now just a few hundred meters from the fleet. Hachibi continued wrapping its tentacles to defend itself, and even though Shintaro used red to attack, leaving its body covered in bruises, it endured. Shintaro also saw that the output power of red was still slightly insufficient for a giant monster like Hachibi, 60 meters tall. However, he believed that his persistence would be able to kill Hachibi. At the same time, he planned to attack the Kumogakure forces. He hadn't forgotten that this wasn't just a battlefield between two people, but part of Kumogakure's invasion of Konoha's battlefield. Shintaro used Blue to drag Hachibi's large body and throw it towards the Kumogakure fleet. Hachibi's massive body and its 8 large tentacles flew through the air and struck the back of the fleet. The huge waves created directly caused more than a dozen Kumogakure ninja transport ships to capsize. The fleet had turned and retreated somewhat towards the land of frost, but was suddenly hit by the large waves. After the rear ships, bearing the brunt of the attack, capsized, the Kumogakure ninjas on board were forced into the sea. Although Kumogakure ninjas used chakra to walk on water, it also consumed chakra. This place was quite far from the shores of the land of frost, and was a natural chasm that ordinary ninjas found difficult to cross. Therefore, the Kumogakure ninjas who fell into the water immediately panicked and rushed to the nearest ships for shelter. Nearby, the battle between Shintaro and Hachibi continued. Perhaps the prolonged fight could no longer be called a battle, but rather a one-sided beating. Shintaro made another strong move in the air, descending. This time, he accurately struck the blood hole he previously made with red at close range. The immense force and the original wound caused Hachibi's tentacle to break off and fall into the sea. "Moo!" Hachibi screamed in agony. "So you also know pain," Shintaro said coldly, not holding back at all, and continued to attack. He flew down, and the tentacle near Hachibi released 2 instantaneous shots. The close-range attack force was enough to easily break rocks. The 2 shots hit the same spot and broke off Hachibi's tentacle. This time, Hachibi let out an unprecedented roar, its eyes filled with rage. He was the great Hachibi, He had always been a bijou feared by everyone. He had suffered before, but was also sealed by strong ninjas like the first Hokage and the third Raikage. But this time he was beaten like this by a junior Uchiha from Konoha. So, Hachibi became furious. Moo! Shintaro laughed angrily, with an uncontrollable tone of rage. So, you can also get angry. He raised his right hand high before he finished speaking, then slammed it down hard, injuring Hachibi again and knocking it to the seabed. Hachibi sank to the bottom of the sea, then emerged again like a giant beast from the deep sea. It extended its remaining 6 tentacles and attacked. Shintaro used blue to move to the root of the tentacle to avoid the attack, and at the same time, compressed a powerful shot to hit the tentacle's root. Hachibi struggled to retract its tentacles to defend itself, but Shintaro actually chose to enter the fresh blood hole just made and made another strong move beside it. Boom! Hachibi broke another tentacle. Hachibi struggled hard, and the stormy waves it caused made the Kumogakure forces miserable. Several ships full of Kumogakure ninjas capsized again, and a large number of unfortunate Kumogakure ninjas were thrown into the sea by the huge waves, turning the war landing into an apocalyptic disaster. Shintaro flew high and saw Hachibi's painful appearance, feeling very happy. Now his power had reached the peak of his previous life, even surpassing it. His striking white hair fluttered wildly in the sea wind at high altitude, and his blue eyes emitted a dangerous light. The Kumogakure ninjas below couldn't help but look at Shintaro while running for their lives, as if seeing a demon coming. White hair, demon eyes. For the first time, a Kumogakure ninja used Shintaro's 2 distinctive features to refer to him. So, the nickname of the white-haired demon eyes spread among the Kumogakure ninjas. Run quickly. The white-haired demon eyes just looked at us, and I fear he will attack us. A Kumogakure ninja shouted in panic. His guess was right. Shintaro raised his hand and pointed at a Kumogakure ninja transport ship, blowing the ship into 2 with an explosion. On another ship, a dark-skinned Kumogakure ninja saw this and quickly went to the stern to lower a small boat, threw the small boat into the sea, and jumped to escape from the great force. No, AI-sama told me to take care of it. I can't die here. He rowed the boat away from the troops and managed to escape Shintaro's attention. The Kumogakure forces fled in all directions under Shintaro's continuous attacks, and he stopped targeting them. Shintaro continued to focus on Hachibi. For the first time, Hachibi's eyes showed fear. Moo! Hachibi moaned, its voice low and shrill. Are you afraid now? It's too late. Shintaro's hand movements did not weaken at all. He flew down and punched Hachibi. Hachibi instinctively wanted to repeat the same trick, curling up its remaining tentacles to defend itself. But Shintaro was close and blew them up one by one. At this moment, the 8 giant octopus tentacles had all been broken, and Hachibi's aura also fell to an unprecedented low state. Yuki, let's escape, Killer Bee shouted anxiously to Hachibi. But Hachibi said, we can't escape anymore. Shintaro began to punch again. Blue sucked Hachibi in front of him, then punched it with all his might, then sucked it again, punched it again, and so on. Not to mention escaping. Hachibi couldn't even escape the other's punches. The battle continued.
No more novels? Take part in the voting. The most requested novels and those with the most likes will be chosen for publication on euroaudiobooks.com. There, I can upload as much as I want without the risk of receiving a strike. Our 18 novels and other content that exceed what is morally acceptable are only published on Patreon or the free novels page. Remember, the site is funded by donations on Ko-fi and Patreon memberships.